Grifting, well, it's the monetization of lying. And in 2026, we're living in the golden age of grifters. For the last few years, I've been doing deep dives into a broad spectrum of wellness influencers and financial scammers who have broken bad. And along the way, I've had to take a step back a few times to look at the big picture. What is it that has allowed so many people to become so unimaginably successful through blatant fraud? Well, over the next few hours, I'm going to give you a bird's eye view of the grifting economy. We're going to explore the techniques, the propaganda tactics, legal framework, and political circumstances that made it possible for the grifters to take over. And I promise you that this is going to be one of the most fascinating videos that you're going to watch all week. Or, because it's pretty long, you could also think of this as a sort of compilation audiobook that you can have on in the background while you fold laundry or work out or at the start of a road trip. Maybe it's a sort of thing that you want to have on while you make dinner or take a nap. I've edited out almost all of the promotional parts and the credits, and I've minimized the music on a few of the videos where I didn't think it was necessary. And if you happen to be a super fan, you'll also notice that there are a few Easter eggs here and there. So with that, let's begin with one of my favorite videos that I've ever done on this channel. It's a satirical masterclass that is designed to let you in on the mindset of online grifters. Introducing Grifting, the monetization of lying. What if I told you you could have anything that you want? Love, money, power, sex, health. The secret to success is within your grasp, and there is a simple formula that has been proven to work over hundreds of years and thousands of iterations. It has made poor people vast fortunes and turned outsiders into royalty. All you need to do to achieve your dreams is make one small change to your perspective. I'm going to let you in on that secret today. Are you ready?
The ability to manifest is fundamentally based in neuroscience.
I'm trying to make Don't Die into the world's most influential ideology.
That I love you, I believe in you.
Everybody can be wealthy.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
Let's go. The first thing that you need to understand is that everyone wants the same things. In a society riven by political division, wealth, stratification, gender inequality, and wildly unfair health outcomes, people want the things that are out of reach. We all want to be sexy, wealthy, powerful, and in the primes of our lives. We all remember times in our lives that were happier than we are right now. Now, listen closely. The first half of the secret to getting everything you ever wanted is this. Promise that you can give people the thing that they want most. Now, I know what you're thinking. You don't have the solution to other people's problems. You don't know what really makes people happy because you aren't perfectly happy, wealthy, sexy, or healthy yourself. So what business do you have giving advice to other people, let alone selling them a solution? Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat this answer for you because this is the shift in perspective that you need to accept. You need to write this message at the very root of your being. You need to be okay with lying. Or to put it another way, the price that you pay for getting everything that you want in life is nothing less than your integrity. Now, before you switch off this channel and go to another video, I want to acknowledge that your initial reaction is both honest and good. It's the same one that 99% of all people will have at the mere suggestion that they trade their integrity for their desires. And that knee-jerk feeling that you have is the same reason that most people never succeed, because they are suckers. Your natural integrity is the impediment to your own success. Remember, you are not selling out, you're buying in. And if you can't stomach that reality, it's still okay, because you can sidestep the problem. You can assuage your resistance with a workaround that, and this is true, has been sanctioned by America's Supreme Court. All you need to do to shake off the moral concerns and the insult to your integrity is adopt a new belief structure that acknowledges that the worldview that you want to profit off of is in fact correct and connected to a deeper structure of the universe itself. Belief It fixes everything. It will wash away your sins. Now, it doesn't particularly matter what belief you adopt so long as it allows you to stay on message. There are established theologies that state that achieving wealth and power in life is a sign of spiritual ascendance. In Christianity, they call it the gospel of prosperity.
God told me to have that plan.
In Buddhism, it's the mind-only school.
As money is in your pocket is good and nice. Similarly, if sex is in your body, it is nice.
If you prefer a secular version, it's simply the power of positive thinking, where you manifest your desires through the inscrutable laws of the universe.
How does the science of manifestation help you get material things?
And there's even scientific theories around the uncertainties in quantum mechanics that you can bend to your political and rhetorical will.
And create from what we call the quantum field.
There are probably 1,000 ideologies and beliefs that do the job. Pick the one that serves you best. Lying is okay so long as it serves your ultimate goals. More than that, faking it until you make it is as close to a spiritual lesson that there ever was.
Fake it till you make it.
Okay, now that we have morals out of the way, let's talk about how you can transform a willingness to lie or believing in a convenient ideology into love, money, power, sex, or health for yourself. Well, the truth is that, well, I was lying to you a little bit. The only things that I can actually promise are money and power. But I think it's reasonable to assume that those things can provide you with the best possible healthcare available and adoration by the people who follow you, which is sort of like love. And if they adore you, well, they'll probably sleep with you too. So to get money and power, you're going to need to sell a product. And this can be like an object, like a pair of glasses or a supplement, or it can be a training course. Or if you really don't want money, you can sell your belief system simply to gain attention. Here are a few examples. If you want to get rich, sell an idea or product that allows other people to get rich. Maybe it's an investment opportunity, a cryptocurrency, or gold, for example.
I have decided to start putting some money into crypto.
And I'm here to help you master your money and build your wealth.
These guys pay $12,000 each to sit in that chair.
You can sell health by claiming that you are the epitome of healthy and telling other people to follow your example.
My name is Gary Brecka. I'm a human biologist, a biohacker, a researcher, and an anti-aging and longevity expert.
Or get sex by selling polyamory, or, well, just selling sex.
But I am here with my beloved wife, Ilana, and we're also here with beloved Alana, who is a part of our relationship constellation.
It doesn't matter how outlandish the product is that you offer.
I'm going to attempt to eat my body weight in testicles.
It can be something as mundane as selling a new formula for coffee.
Bulletproof coffee, were you just fiddling around with different recipes or what happened?
I went to Tibet to learn meditation from the masters, and I was at 18,000 feet, and a little Tibetan woman gave me yak butter tea, and I drank it and my brain worked in a way that made no sense.
Or a new shade of eyewear. Here's an example from a new video explaining exactly how the neuroscientist Andrew Huberman turned his scientific credibility into constant cash flow.
In June of 2022, at the crazy height of Huberman's subscriber growth, Rocha hired Huberman as a scientific advisor. This began a 2-year warm-up period where Huberman would promote Rocha's glasses alongside AG1 in his ad breaks. When a podcaster stops to talk about their sponsors with timestamps ready-made to skip the ad, the audience should know the drill. But then it all changed. After the firestorm of Huberman's sex scandal and a whiff of getting canceled, Huberman would cross the Rubicon to cash in and go from your typical sponsor ad break to an all-in,
these Rocha wind-down lens glasses.
Slap his name on it.
Enter the code Huberman.
Deal with the devil.
After a sex scandal, the Rocha deal sort of becomes an opportunity for him, and he noticed the ability to make quite a bit of money selling something in his core expertise, these blue blocking glasses that he knows probably don't work. That clip comes from a super deep dive documentary on blue blockers directed by one of my channel members, Sebastian Barbera. You can watch the full doc right here on Sebastian's new channel, Intero. I have to tell you, it confirms, well, pretty much everything that you ever thought about Andrew Huberman. But the secret to grifting is obviously not just about making promises. There's a deeper rule that connects tinted lenses and supplements to energy healing, extreme diets, or even coffee enemas.
You got to explore coffee enemas.
The best products make someone feel a sensation in their bodies. Drugs that alter someone's perception, whether it's as subtle as caffeine or strong as a psychedelic, breathwork that makes them dizzy, or a supplement with a B vitamin. Combining these powerful sensations along with a hope or belief or ideology is a recipe for sales conversions and, interestingly enough, increases placebo responses. Indeed, health influencers, if that's what you want to be, instinctually know and capitalize on the general lack of research on so-called active placebos, even though research has repeatedly shown that stronger sensations and more elaborate rituals actually do alter and in many cases improve health outcomes. Here's how it works with blue blocking glasses.
Once I put these blue light blocking glasses on, my brain is designed to think, oh, this is now my nighttime wind down routine.
This is a form of conditioning. It can be achieved with scent, with sound, dimming the lights, normal sunglasses, or by wearing a cardboard cutout of glasses on your face.
You can capitalize on that research lacuna by suggesting that big pharma or the government doesn't want you to know that the product you're offering has just enough reality behind it to garner favorable testimonials from people who feel a change because they used it. No matter what you feel about the morality of griftonomics, everything that I have described so far is explicitly legal. In 1946, a Supreme Court decision called Ballard versus the United States stated that you cannot be prosecuted for fraud as long as the claims you make around a product are a sincere religious belief. Since courts have a hard time proving your own subjective sincerity, you would have to commit a truly outrageous fraud to wind up in legal jeopardy, and it basically never happens. The only thing that you really need to worry about is your reputation itself. In a world where online grifting has become both immensely profitable and commonplace, there is a cottage industry of so-called journalists and anti-grifters who will, if you are successful, come after the carefully manicured reputation that you've built up.
Perfectly safe to consume. This is unpasteurized raw milk.
Hey everyone, this video is brought to you by Maha. Make America.
This is a story about how power and attention create perverse incentives.
I fact-check false health claims.
Everybody should do this. Spend a little bit of time thinking about the times when you believe something that's not true and why it happened to you.
It can sting when someone calls out the lies that you tell to build your empire. It feels bad because you don't want people to think that you're a liar or a hypocrite. But don't worry. They're just haters who are jealous of your success. The audience you've earned won't give up on you because to do so would mean that they would have to acknowledge that they're the ones who are suckers, and no one wants that. Just remind yourself that telling the truth will never make them, the people who call you out, the sort of fortune that you earned through grifting. They'll never have the resources to compete in the attention economy like you will, and the money you make is more than enough to justify whatever they reveal about your true character. And just remember, no matter what happens in your grifting career, I will always love you. Okay, I'm going to take a second here to be explicit about the message of this video just in case someone here misunderstood what it was really about. The rules I laid out are in fact a tried and true recipe for grifting. They've been around for literally thousands of years, and I've written a book on it called The Enlightenment Trap. It's all about that history. Grifters are not good people. But yes, the pattern is both legal and well established. I made this video to outline the psychology of the influencer economy as it exists today, not as a recipe for you to follow. I've been watching so many videos by grifters that I think I could have had an excellent career selling sugar pills and get-rich-quick schemes. Then again, I wouldn't be having as much fun as I am having right now. For the next video, though, I wanted to take a look at how the current age of propaganda really got started. I mean, sure, people have been lying since before we had written records, but something happened at the turn of the 20th century that turned 2-bit hucksters into industrial leaders. a propaganda technique pioneered by none other than the nephew of Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays. Next up, a brief history of mind control. This is Edward Bernays, an evil genius who used the methods and techniques of wartime propaganda to invent modern marketing.
Everybody else's tobacco is poisonous. Lucky Strikes is toasted.
In World War I, it was pretty clear where this information was coming from. And today, we might be getting messaging that we don't quite necessarily recognize as propaganda.
In this video, I'm going to tell you about the insane history of the man who invented propaganda and then weaponized it to make vast fortunes for the largest companies in the world. And you would be forgiven if you've never heard of him before. However, if you've ever seen an influencer tout a supplement line, considered that a country might stage a false flag operation to sway public opinion, heard anything about Sigmund Freud, or listened to someone explain that cigarettes could help them lose weight, then you've been living in Bernays' world all along.
What my father understood about groups is that they are manipulable, they're malleable, and that you can tap into their deepest desires or their deepest fears and use that to your own purposes.
It's hard to know where to start with Bernays because his career begins in the first decade of the 1900s and stretches all the way to the 1990s. He died at the age of 103, and every one of the eras where he was active bears his signature fingerprints. He began his career as a promoter of Broadway shows before he was conscripted into the propaganda wing of the U.S. Army selling war bonds at the outbreak of World War I. Now, it's hard to believe now, but at the time, Americans were isolationists who were largely against backing wars in foreign countries. So his job at the Army's Committee on Public Information aimed to convince Americans that self-sacrifice, mostly eating less and contributing money to the war effort, was their patriotic duty. Later, he helped design flyers that would be dropped in enemy trenches, meant to convince hungry German soldiers to surrender their arms in exchange for warm meals. Now, the thing that made his work so effective in wartime is something that you and I would see as almost comically obvious today. He made the connection that you can change someone's actions by playing to what they want to feel instead of what they actually need. And after the war was over, he used that key insight to fundamentally change the world.
When I came back to the United States, I decided that if you could use propaganda for war, you could certainly use it for peace.
This is how the field of public relations was founded. And the key thing to understand is that before Bernays, advertisements in the media were straightforward. They assumed that you would only buy something when you needed it. For instance, if you wanted to take pictures, Kodak had a camera to sell you. Meanwhile, the first car ads convinced you that maintaining a horse was just too much trouble. Even Coca-Cola prided itself most on its thirst-quenching abilities. His innovation was how the act of buying something fundamentally changes who you are as a person. Consider, if you will, any car commercial today.
Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
Or Coca-Cola, emphasizing how drinking it will help you make friends. Or how taking pictures with your new iPhone will make you feel good.
When I push, I feel good. When I push, I feel good.
They're not really selling cars or Coke or cameras. They're selling the idea of how a product will change your experience of reality itself. This seems crazy obvious to anyone in marketing today, but it was a sea change for the industry in 1921. And of course, cigarette companies were the first ones to bring Bernays' insights into the mainstream. In 1929, the tobacco company Philip Morris hired Bernays to create a campaign that would encourage women to light up. At the time, only 5% of women were smokers, and Philip Morris saw room for improvement. They asked Bernays, who noticed that there was a wave of feminism sweeping the country. so he hijacked it. He hired a handful of women to smoke publicly at an Easter parade in New York as a form of protest against the patriarchy. For being able to smoke should be something that is available to all people, regardless of gender. He told them to call the cigarettes torches of liberty. Then Bernays invited reporters to stoke fake outrage, and thus a conversation about women smoking in public was born, and cigarettes, oh, they were sold. Hitching women's desire for parity with men to cigarettes didn't do much to advance the cause of women's rights, but it did supercharge cigarette sales to women. Smoking rates among women doubled in less than a year. And a few years later, he helped brand Virginia Slims as a way for cigarettes to help women lose weight instead of going for a sweet. Along the way, he coined the phrase, a second on the lips and forever on the hips, which is now practically an anthem in anorexia chat rooms to this day, and was even repeated on an episode of Friends in the 1990s.
Last night I was finishing off a pizza and she said, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips.
And this is all just the tip of the iceberg, a history that you were already probably maybe a little bit aware about. However, we're about to get into a place where truth is truly stranger than fiction. There is one thing about Bernays' family history that is going to blow your mind, something that made me, someone who came very close to getting a PhD in the social sciences, rethink a whole lot about what I thought I knew about the impact of scholarly research. And it's this. Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund Freud is on the right.
Right there.
And he is traveling.
That's you, isn't it?
That's me there.
And this is weird for a whole lot of reasons. First, because of how Freud's theory about the subconscious plays out in Bernays' marketing techniques, but even more so for how Bernays is the reason that anyone knows about Freud outside of Austria at all.
Facing bankruptcy, he wrote to his nephew for help. Bernays responded by arranging for Freud's works to be published for the first time in America, and began to send his uncle precious dollars, which Freud kept secretly in a foreign bank account.
He was Freud's agent, if you will, to get his books published. Well, of course, once the books were being published, Eddie couldn't help himself but promote these books, see that everybody read them, make them controversial, emphasize the fact that, do you know what Freud says about sex and what he says cigarettes are a symbol of and so on and so forth? How do you suppose all those stories got out? Certainly the academics weren't spreading these around the country. Eddie Bernays was. Then, when Freud became accepted, well then, of course, to go to a client and say, well, Uncle Siggy, see, then that had some cachet. But notice there, first Eddie created Uncle Siggy in the U.S., made him acceptable, secondly, and thirdly, then capitalized on Uncle Siggy. Typical Bernays performance.
That clip is from an amazing documentary series by the director Adam Curtis called The Century of Self, and I've used several pieces from it while putting together this report. If once you're done with this video, you want to know more about Bernays and more importantly, how Freud and Bernays interacted, I'm going to suggest that you cue that one up right now. When I was watching it for the first time, I had to hit pause on that quote and think about what they were saying for a second, because absolutely everyone has heard of Freud as the preeminent psychologist and psychoanalyst in world history. He's the guy who invented the idea of the subconscious and pioneered the study of dreams. Heck, if you ever took a psychology class in college, you probably read some of his books. The story that we tell about Freud is that the influence of his work grew organically in psychological circles before breaking out into the mainstream and going global. But this turns that whole idea on its head. Freud was basically a broke academic in Austria with maybe a little bit of regional cachet, but he was only taken seriously as a global academic after the world's most powerful publicist took the case. In other words, the publicity tail wagged the scholarly dog. And it makes me wonder how many other academic theories this is true for as well. Do theories gain traction because they stand up to the rigor of the academic process, or because a marketer manipulates the public to think they were influential, which causes scholars to follow along? Of course, this is exactly what Bernays did with cigarettes when, in addition to what I already mentioned about their campaigns, he also manufactured the idea that cigarette smoking was healthy by getting doctor endorsements.
Yes, according to this repeated nationwide survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette.
Much later in his career, Bernays went on David Letterman and joked about how exactly that scam worked.
All right, now, doctor, tell me again what the doctor is. What are we dealing with?
Well,
You're the father of public relations.
What we're dealing with really is the concept that people will believe me more if you call me doctor.
Oh, I see.
In other words, all someone needs to do to gain influence in the world is first don the trappings of respectability, and the actual respectability, it follows suit. This is backward from how we think the world should work. Faking it until you make it doesn't make you qualified, even if it is regrettably effective. Bernays was hardly keeping his technique secret. In 1929, Bernays codified his ideas on manipulating public opinion in a book titled, and you can't make this up, Propaganda. I did a video a few months ago about how the self-help gurus Mel Robbins and Jay Shetty manipulate their audience's emotions to get them to work for free, and I traced their present-day techniques all the way back to Bernays' book. So many viewers wanted to know more about Bernays that I decided to put together this video, which is just a subtle hint to you to tell me down in the comments below what you think I should work on next, because sometimes I really do listen. Anyway, the worldview he lays out is actually pretty bleak, stating that there is a complex relationship between psychology and democracy and corporations where invisible stakeholders shape the information people have access to and their values and consumer activities through propaganda. His main concept, which he terms engineering consent, is that it's the job of these powerful stakeholders to make people believe they're making decisions on their own while their actual actions are being controlled. Or, to put it in his own words, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. Are you ready to start sounding the deep state alarm bells yet? That a shadowy group of rich people are actually controlling your mind? Well, Bernays would think that you are both smart, savvy, and probably very attractive if you agreed with him. But let's get back to that relationship between capitalism and propaganda. He notes that there is a delicate dance between investing in building production capacity on an industrial level and the necessity to prepare demand to make investments pay off. Quoting him, "A single factory capable of supplying a whole continent with its particular product cannot afford to wait until the public asks for its product. It must maintain constant touch through advertising and propaganda with the vast public in order to assure itself the continuous demand which alone will make its costly plant profitable." In other words, public relations and propaganda are the life force of the consumerism that powers the American economy. In the almost 100 years since this disastrous ideology took hold, the world transformed away from a needs-based economy into a vast consumer-driven monstrosity that produces mountains of useless crap that gives us just brief moments of happiness before ending up in landfills. Instead of building an economy based on needs, getting rid of your horse because the car was more efficient, or drinking a Coke because it's thirst quenching, Bernays hijacked our nervous system's penchant for resource gathering into a monster of endless consumption because buying things was a magical force that transformed you as a person. In Freud's terminology, Bernays activated humanity's libidinal forces to fuel a particular vision of consumer demand and capitalist enterprise that ultimately served the richest and most powerful people in society. But wait, because it gets worse. Because right after the book came out, some very important people in Germany took an immediate interest. Adam Curtis again.
But the Nazis did not see this as a return to an old form of autocratic control. It was a new alternative to democracy, in which the feelings and the desires of the masses would still be central. But they would be channeled in such a way as to bind the nation together. The chief exponent of this was Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda.
Es mag gut sein, Macht zu besitzen, die auf Gewehren ruht. Besser aber und beglückender ist es, das Herz eines Volkes zu gewinnen und es auch zu behalten.
Goebbels organised huge rallies whose function, he said, was to forge the mind of the nation into a unity of thinking, feeling and desire. One of his inspirations, he told an American journalist, was the writings of Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays. In his work on crowd psychology, Freud had described how the frightening irrationality inside human beings could emerge in such groups. The deep, what he called libidinal forces of desire, are given up to the leader, while the aggressive instincts are unleashed on those outside the group.
In retrospect, this should have been a red flag for anyone considering following Bernays' lead. I mean, this is what President Eisenhower, a general against the Nazis, specifically warned against in his presidential farewell speech.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic process.
Unfortunately, while the world eventually overthrew the death cult of Nazism, it doubled down on the mind manipulation that Bernays pioneered. It wasn't long until Bernays started advising the government itself. Bernays mentored American presidents and even the CIA throughout the Cold War. The most atrocious example of many examples came in 1950, when the United Fruit Company was upset that the democratically elected leader of Guatemala didn't want to be a colonial holding of an international corporation anymore. He was skeptical of how United Fruit had turned a huge proportion of Guatemala's population into fruit slaves. So, United Fruit hired Bernays to sort out the situation.
He organised a trip to Guatemala for influential American journalists. Few of them knew anything about the country or its politics. Bernays arranged for them to be entertained and to meet selected Guatemalan politicians who told them that Arbenz was a communist controlled by Moscow. During the trip, there was also a violent anti-American demonstration in the capital. Many of those who worked for United Fruit were convinced it had been organised by Bernays himself. He also created a fake independent news agency in America called the Middle American Information Bureau. It bombarded the American media with press releases saying that Moscow was planning to use Guatemala as a beachhead to attack America. All of this had the desired effect.
The Sultan of Spin was at it again, and this time he convinced the American public that anyone who opposed American imperialism was a commie. Shortly after his publicity stunt, he helped the CIA stage a false flag operation and then a coup, which deposed the leader and planted Marxist literature throughout his residence. You know, typical Cold War stuff. Above all else, Bernays created a form of marketing that used emotions to manipulate vast crowds of people to do the bidding of his powerful clients. His techniques changed the very nature of the global economic system by making us believe that our individual desires originated within ourselves instead of with his own planned messages. In other words, he made a group of people think and act in unison by making them believe that they were all really individuals thinking and acting for themselves. And to make sense of what this really means, I want to turn to the work of the radical social theorist Herbert Marcuse, who, in 1964, wrote the book One-Dimensional Man. we are again confronted with one of the most vexing aspects of advanced industrial civilization, the rational character of its irrationality. Its productivity and efficiency, its capacity to increase and spread comforts, to turn waste into need and destruction into construction. The extent to which this civilization transforms the object world into an extension of a man's mind and body makes the very notion of alienation questionable. The people recognize themselves in their commodities. They find their soul in their automobile, hi-fi set, split-level home, kitchen equipment. The very mechanism which ties the individual to a society has changed, and social control is anchored in the new needs which it has produced. Wow. The ideology of consumerism is the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. Marcuse's now 60-year-old book still rings fresh to anyone who has ever contemplated the subtle effectiveness of the ads that you see in your social media feeds. The soullessness of the social media business model is merely the logical completion of the project Bernays started more than 100 years ago. The companies that own the means of distribution today, the very platform where you are watching this video, serve you a nonstop stream of personalized advertisements that make you feel like you're a special person if you just buy the right product, apply the right discount code, or embrace a unique fashion choice. And though Bernays could never have conceived of the computing power that we have here today, we know that those same drives are being hijacked by super powerful AI to make subtle changes to our political opinions and the way we act with the community at large. Or to put it in the words of one such tech overlord, the CEO of the surveillance company Palantir, Peter Thiel,
maybe you could actually unilaterally change the world without having to constantly convince people and beg people and plead with people who are never going to agree with you through technological means.
The world we live in today is the world that Edward Bernays gave to us. From the way we think about what science is ascendant to our political motivations and our consumer choices, it's hard to know where you, the individual, ends and the marketing impulses we've been fed begin. It infects everything that we think is authentic and unique about ourselves, and instead feeds us the sugary byproduct of authenticity in the form of whatever purchasing power you're able to muster on behalf of the people who can pay marketers. And with that happy thought, I want to thank you so much for watching this video and letting me subtly enter your mind and influence the neural connections that make you tick. Hopefully they're ticking in a slightly more healthy way than they did before. Edward Bernays was the propaganda pioneer who fundamentally transformed the way that we think about products. He's the industrial capitalism side of the grifting equation. But there's another side to the Griftoverse that has very little to do with megacorporations and instead exists at the intersection of our legal system and religious freedom. The next video in this series concerns a landmark legal case that you have probably never heard of, but one that nonetheless guaranteed that your social media feed will never be free of wellness scammers. Next up, why did the Supreme Court legalize wellness scams? A landmark Supreme Court judgment opened up the floodgates to religious scams in 1944, effectively allowing any religious group free rein to sell miracle products that claimed to achieve impossible results, just so long as the worshippers' beliefs were, quote, sincerely held. In this video, we're going to unpack the strange history of this wellness cult, whose charismatic leaders had connections to white nationalists all around the country, and how 80 years later, that ruling paved the way for an unadulterated boom in supplement grifts and legal Ponzi schemes that infect our social media feeds today. To understand how we got here, we need to go back in time to the 1930s, where Guy Ballard and his wife Edna founded a controversial spiritual group who believed that you could manifest any result through thought alone. It was called the I Am movement. They promise to bring people into direct contact with ascended masters, mystical beings that allegedly governed human history from an outpost hidden inside Mount Shasta in Northern California. Their violet ray device was sold as a miracle cure, promising to be able to heal blindness and even cancer through divine energy. Their following grew into the millions, and soon the pair became incredibly wealthy from mail-in donations and product sales.
A big part of being a part of IAM was donating money. And what the Ballards would call it were IAM love gifts. They weren't even calling it donations. They're called love gifts. This is your money turns into love if you give it to us. The Ballards were doing very well for themselves. They lived in the Griffith Park neighborhood of LA. They lived in like a palace. They were driving, luxury cars. They were both dripping with jewels. So, I mean, they were raking in the money from love gifts, but also from all of these products that they sold.
That's Leah Satilli, an investigative reporter and the author of the new book, The Blazing Eye Sees All, about the history of the American New Age movement. She's also the host of some amazing podcasts like Burn Wild and Bundyville. I tore through her book last month, which is where I found out about this story in the first place. You see, the Department of Justice was really worried about a new breed of strange New Age scam that was going out across the country. And in their court filings, they argued that the Ballards said that they, quote, had the ability to cure persons of diseases which are ordinarily classified by the medical profession as being incurable diseases. And they pointed to 18 individual cases where the Ballards explicitly lied about the results of their miracle cures. After years of court proceedings, the judge instructed the jury to ignore the plausibility of the IAM belief system, including their claims that the Ballards had personally shaken hands with Jesus himself and this New Age saint called Saint Germain, and the prophets of the lost continent of Lemuria, saying that, quote, as far as the court sees the issue, it is immaterial what these defendants preached or wrote or taught in their classes. They are not going to be permitted to speculate on the actuality of the happening of those incidents. And then the judge clarified, the issue is, did these defendants honestly and in good faith believe those things? If they did, they should be acquitted. And this is exactly what the jury decided. No matter how bizarre and impossible their ideology, IAM could say whatever it wanted and find shelter under the Constitution. Now, it's worth noting that the dissenting opinions served as a warning for what was going to come.
There are two dissenting opinions that are scathing even by modern terms.
Chief Justice Harlan Stone wrote that, I cannot say freedom of thought and worship includes the freedom to procure money by making knowingly false statements about one's religious experiences. And then, the state of one's mind is a facet as capable of fraudulent misrepresentation as one's physical condition or the state of his bodily health. He was saying that basically, if you are lying to yourself, it is still fraud when you lie to others. It's just that the court didn't agree.
It's extraordinary because it really does provide protections for just about anything that you want to believe.
The Ballard case leads to foundational questions about the limits of religious teachings. While the government has been able to exercise limitations for religious practices around like polygamy and even libel, presumably it also outlaws human sacrifices. But what do you do with more fringe issues, like how some of IAM's teachings seem designed to lead to dangerous divisions in society? The IAM's movement's teachings incorporate not only spiritual enlightenment, but the idea of racial superiority, about how the white race was better than any other race, making them a troubling example of how these scams can be used to push far-right and xenophobic ideologies.
Dude, this belief system that IAM started of like this nationalistic, paranoid Americanism that's a part of the religion.
Today, people seem shocked that yoga-clad, chakra-healing New Agers have become some of the most vocal proponents of right-wing causes, from Trump to RFK Jr. It's as if we thought that the hippies of the 1960s invented that sort of ideology, but it couldn't be further from the truth.
It's that hyper-nationalism that sort of threw me for a loop. Because when I think of New Age belief systems, I think of like this pretty wooey, hippie, kind of crunchy, thing. What I Am showed me was how integral being American was to I Am. And maybe that's why it appealed to people in more conservative parts of the country.
Sotilli's book proves that new alternative religious movements often tend towards authoritarianism. These elements would go on to influence not only their followers, but also the broader landscape of fringe spiritual movements where racism and pseudoscience could be packaged as part of a healing narrative. Fast forward to today. And that 1944 ruling has had lasting effects. The case set the precedent that allowed religious groups and then later wellness grifters to operate with impunity.
Now, social media has made it so easy for everybody to be a part of really extreme political groups. And that is certainly the case with this New Age stuff.
The takeaway was that if you believe your own lies, well, then you can profit off of them. The Ballard ruling would go on to play a central role in the explosion of wellness products, self-help programs, and pyramid schemes. Now companies and influencers are selling the same kind of snake oil, promising everything from instant weight loss to magic cures for chronic diseases.
If this one thing is done, whatever chronic ailments that one has will completely vanish.
But this time they're doing it through Instagram ads and YouTube videos and late-night infomercials.
The court is sort of saying, yeah, that's the game. If people want to believe that and they want to, no one held a gun to their head and said, give all your money to the Ballards. If you want to do that, you can do that.
At the heart of these scams lies a simple but powerful idea. Belief itself is the key to reality. As long as you can convince people to buy into the idea that they hold the power to transform their lives or their health through some secret knowledge or product, you can sell anything. And the Ballard versus United States ruling ensures that those selling these products are actually protected by law, so long as they frame it as part of a religious or spiritual practice. Today's version of the grift often involves figures that I've covered on this channel over the last 2 years. People like Joe Dispenza, who implausibly states that the brain changes reality at a quantum level, explicitly linking miracle powers to the sincerity of belief.
The subatomic world responds to our observation, but the average person loses their attention span every 6 to 10 seconds per minute. It's not that the quantum field doesn't respond, it's that we have to up our level of will and sincerity. And when that happens, we'll see measurable results in our life.
As I've reported before, that is, of course, all pseudoscientific nonsense. It's almost like he's directly quoting the Ballard decision, and his methods have made him incredibly wealthy and powerful without ever delivering independently, scientifically validated results. Because the ruling puts science and belief on equal footing. It's no shock that Dispenza is at least spiritually descended from the I Am cult after he studied the teachings of a 30,000-year-old Lemurian warrior named Ramtha, who possesses a former cheerleader named Jay-Z Knight to give his spiritual lessons on capitalism and accumulating money to the people of today. And yeah, I know that sentence sounds crazy, but here's a little bit of Ramtha.
I do not want to deliver a message. I am that which I am. That is it why indeed which they are who listens. That which is the Christ within, it comes forward. You have lived 7.5 million years in search of paradise. It has always been within you, never outside of you.
Ramtha and Knight are a whole topic that I'm going to save for another video. Suffice it to say that modern-day grifters operate pyramid schemes where the people at the top make huge profits by getting others to sell the same products as well. But unlike traditional Ponzi schemes that don't involve a religious movement, this new brand of grift is actually protected by the Ballard decision, because it's framed as a belief system.
The game is to grift, and when people do it, they're protected by our court system.
When you go onto the internet, can you even tell the difference between a fantastical belief and a formal religious movement and a business pitch? It's all completely intermeshed.
It's all true. They're just different levels of truth.
Health grifters and spiritual manifestors have made it all the way up into the Oval Office itself. I did a video a few months back showing how the people that Trump surrounds himself with are all part of the same intellectual Ponzi scheme. The legacy of that 1944 ruling continues to be felt as wellness grifters and pyramid schemes grow more pervasive, making it harder for people to distinguish between genuine help and empty promises. And remember, the most dangerous grifts of all are the ones that can't be touched by law. Which brings me to my last point, because after a close reading of that law, I've decided to make something very special for you. Have you been feeling off or unaligned, blocked? Maybe your third eye is a little lazy or your root chakra is completely unemployed. I get it. Times are tough. But don't worry, because for the low price of just $8 a month, I am personally offering to pray for you. That's right. Sign up for my Substack today at sgcarney.substack.com, link in the pinned comment and the description, and you'll receive a custom one-size-fits-all energy cleansing performed by me, a totally qualified and definitely not self-appointed spiritual authority. Each month, I will channel my divine frequencies straight into your inbox, lifting your vibration to unseen heights. And what do you get for your $8 a month? Well, aside from the warm and tingling sensations of knowing that you have invested in your own cosmic destiny, you will also receive a completely unverifiable yet deeply meaningful monthly spiritual alignment. An email infused with 100% pure mystical energy that no scientist can disprove. And a special members-only player where I personally think about your name for approximately 2.4 seconds. If you sign up right now or in the next 24 hours, I will also whisper your name into the wind. Alberta Coors, Nandi Aguilar. Remember, true spiritual enlightenment isn't something that you just stumble upon. It is something that you subscribe to. And luckily for you, I have made enlightenment affordable at just $8 a month. Other gurus would charge you thousands of dollars for this kind of metaphysical upkeep, and I'm bringing it to you, this divine access, at a disruptor price, because your soul deserves a monthly payment plan. So begin your spiritual transformation now, because inner peace should always sit behind a paywall. Namaste. I need to take a second here and tell you how glad I am that I can put this compilation together in this specific order. Normally on YouTube or Substack, my videos drop in your feed at random, and it's hard to see how they all fit together. Curating this list helps me make a much larger point because I've been building up to something. In the next video in this series, key figures close to the Trump administration that you may have never heard of, or alternately, if you run in certain wellness or real estate circles, people who you can't escape no matter how often you try to unsubscribe from their feeds. I'm talking about the fake billionaire Grant Cardone and the ultra wellness huckster Gary Brecka, who ended up suing each other and letting you in on the whole mad mess that is their careers. This is one of my all-time favorite videos, introducing how wellness grifters took over America. A few years ago, one of the country's most prominent financial grifters,
I make money. I make a lot of money.
Teamed up with a renowned wellness scammer.
He's a human biologist.
In a company that promised exponential gains to your health and your wealth.
And now he's on a mission to extend your life.
And the message, it went viral. They amassed tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, slinging just about every health fad that the Griftoverse had to offer. And then it all fell apart.
We didn't realize at the time that we were being duped.
You are a con man of the highest order.
He called me a pedophile.
In a dramatic reversal, both partners accused each other of being the worst kind of scammer, and then they filed dueling lawsuits, each seeking $100 million in damages. And the beauty of their very public fight is that it's all coming out in court documents. Amid all of the allegations, insults, and dirty laundry, I have to ask, is it possible that both of them are right?
You got to understand, there's a scammer and a scammee.
Maybe they're all scammers. On one level, this is the story of how the conflict between the professional billionaire Grant Cardone,
international sales expert Grant Cardone,
and the wellness fad evangelizer Gary Brecka exposed the anatomy of their scam tactics for all the world to see. But on another level, the public spat and decades history of grift is a microcosm of the tendency for Americans to elevate con men and scam artists to positions of influence and power that goes all the way to the White House. If you haven't heard about these two individuals before, don't worry about it. You already know their type. Here's Cardone's sales pitch in just a single sentence.
That everybody on this stream could be a billionaire.
If that sounds too good to be true, it is. Let's move on to Gary Brecka.
I wasn't licensed to practice medicine. I'm still not licensed to practice medicine.
If that's not a match made in scam heaven, I don't know what is. Together, they built a wellness brand called 10X Health, which sold inspirational seminars, genetic tests, health gadgets, and specialized training, which implicitly offered the nonsensical promise of, well, 10Xing your health, while simultaneously not being medical advice. And if that was all there was to this story, I'd probably just tell you to skip to the next video, because there's nothing shocking about scammers getting caught up in their own grift. But what fascinates me about the whole situation is how it all connects directly to the top of the Maha movement, to RFK Jr. and President Donald Trump himself. Just about everyone in this story has had their picture taken with RFK or Trump. They share stages together, get invited to the inaugural balls, and are regulars at Mar-a-Lago. They claim that their scientifically shaky health fads, like a $78,000 red light therapy bed, custom ice baths, supplement stacks, and endless alternative medicine quackery, are 10x better than evidence-based medicine. This fad-driven version of healthcare mirrors exactly RFK's plans as the head of Health and Human Services. There's a reason that many of the grifters and scammers I've exposed on this channel champion RFK Jr. From the convicted felon founder of the Kratom Kava health elixir Feel Free, to Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, Brian Johnson, and Mark Hyman, Andrew Huberman even works out at the same gym as RFK. All of whom stand to directly profit from loosening the standards of evidence in the medical paradigm. Or to put it another way, these are all the people who truly practice Grant Cardone's secret of success. The secret that doesn't sound fascist one single bit.
Collaborate. Collaborate with power.
However, before I dig into this, my legal team has informed me that I should add a little disclaimer right at the top.
Everything you are about to watch is my opinion based on the facts that I have available to me. This video is the result of my own research, reaching out to key people involved, legal documents, and publicly available audio and video. The conclusions here are mine alone and should not be construed as legal verdicts. Terminology like scammer, grifter, thief, charlatan, and liar, just to name a few, are merely expressions of my opinion of the subjects involved and not evidence of criminal convictions or civil judgments. If there are errors, I will, as always, issue corrections in the description below and pinned comments.
By continuing to watch this video after this point, you agree to abide by the terms and conditions in the description below.
Now, the reason for that disclaimer is fairly simple. Grant Cardone files a lot of defamation lawsuits. And before we can even get into what's going on with Gary Brecka, we first need to look at an earlier suit because it is directly connected. So sit back and get comfortable because this is really quite a ride. The first thing you need to know is that Grant Cardone's company, 10X, which promises to give you the tools you need to reach unfathomable wealth, and I assume 10X your investment in Cardone's inspirational seminars, does not have the best reputation.
I'm going to just say it here. Grant Cardone, fake guru, dude.
People would spend thousands of dollars, including myself, just in hopes of getting a picture with the man.
Do what I shared with you, and I promise you, your life will get 10x better.
Everybody just glorifying and idolizing this guy to the point to where he could just do no wrong, just like a god.
In 2020, plaintiffs filed a class action lawsuit against Cardone Capital for what they said was violating the Securities Act and making misleading statements about recurring revenue that never, well, recurred. That case is still wending its way through the appeal process. And then, a few years ago, the former CEO of T-Mobile, John Legere, called Cardone a scammer on a Clubhouse live stream, and then all hell broke loose.
Grant, because you're a fucking con man. I'll say this on this room right now. I believe that in the next year, Grant Cardone will be found guilty of fraud. I believe that Grant Cardone will be found guilty of fraud, and I want nothing to do with it.
The insult left Cardone speechless.
I'm not going to repeat what he said.
Maybe he was shocked because John Legere lambasted Cardone's connection to the Church of Scientology.
So how much you paying to the church, Grant?
John, John, what does that matter?
How much you paying to the church?
John, what do you...
And then suggested that Cardone was not as rich as he portrayed himself to be.
By the way, he's not a billionaire. He doesn't have close to $1 billion. And he is somebody, somebody here. He's somebody who is self-promoting.
And as Cardone remembers it, Legere started hitting below the belt, too.
It gets way worse. He called me a pedophile.
Well, he calls you a pedophile.
Thousands of people.
Oh.
Tens of thousands of people have heard that. This has been played millions of times to millions of ears.
This was a little strange to me because I listened to all of the recordings I could find of that event, and I never heard John Legere once accuse Cardone of being sexually attracted to children or assaulting them. Which leads me to believe that maybe Cardone invented that part. This all happened live in an online chat room with roughly 1,000 people in it, which by the standards of the internet today is pretty small. Yet Cardone contended that this was the killing blow to his reputation as a real estate mogul and get-rich-quick influencer. So he filed a $100 million lawsuit against Legere, hoping to recoup the damages that the conversation caused.
No less than $100 million in damages.
Okay.
And that's me personally. That's not our companies.
Which you might think was a little counterproductive. If Cardone did indeed find his business almost mortally wounded by Legere's comments, it's hard to fathom why he also insisted on spreading the message far and wide. Why would he double and then triple down spreading what he contends are false stories on YouTube channels all over the internet?
My children have to hear their friends say, I heard that your daddy's a pedophile.
Literally, as far as I can tell, no one called him a pedophile. And yet, the more he repeats the message, the more it spreads.
He called me a pedophile.
Which is, incidentally, also just the flip side of the same law of attraction game plan that Cardone repeats in his business courses, where affirmations make things real.
He called me a pedophile.
The only thing I ever found on the internet that even hinted at a connection like that was this video that was forwarded to me by a confidential source, which, well, it was actually uploaded originally by his wife.
I'm out here in the shower portion. Oh, cover yourself up, Papa.
Yes, darling.
While
Darling,
these two, I can't show Sabrina, but Sabrina, while they shower, Sabrina, poke behind it. Poke your head. Poke your head.
Poke your head out.
Poke your head. Oh, there you are. There you are. Look, two showers.
That's Grant Cardone and his, well, much younger daughter in the shower. Make of it what you will. Still, I have to wonder, maybe Cardone didn't actually feel defamed, but he was actually using the legal process as a way to gain publicity. Would someone be so base as to weaponize our sacred legal process? While defamation suits have a place in democracy, such as the case of Alex Jones, baselessly spreading conspiracy theories about the Sandy Hook murder victims, as well as Giuliani's and Fox News's deliberate lies about voting security. Those types of cases aside, defamation laws are also frequently used to silence a free press and undermine the First Amendment. There are countless cases of billionaires using the legal system to attack and threaten their adversaries who don't want to be tied up in endless legal proceedings. The problem is so well understood that many U.S. states have anti-SLAPP laws designed to protect the press from baseless billionaire-backed cases that allow a reporter to recoup legal expenses from parties who are trying to misuse the court system.
If the defendant can demonstrate that their conduct is an exercise of First Amendment right in connection with a public issue, then it's entitled to protection under the statute.
For the record, Pokebear LLC is located in the great state of Colorado with a great anti-SLAPP law. And on that point, I have a message for you. The video you're watching right now took me more than a month to put together, and I want it to reach 1 million views. And if you like this sort of independent journalism, it would mean the world to me if you can help me spread this message far and wide by hitting that like and subscribe button and sharing it on any social media profile you have. Just the act of doing that sends a signal to the algorithm to boost and promote this video to wider and wider audiences. And one more thing, because of the amount of work it takes to put these videos together, I sometimes miss things that are going on in the news cycle, which is why I have a back channel. And it's a place where I can do videos that I experiment with new forms and things that may eventually make it onto this channel, but in a way that doesn't clog up the feed. So go check it out, there's a link in the description, and without further ado, let's go back to the video. Cardone was using the defamation laws in the mold of Donald Trump. He even hired the same lawyer.
Grant's lawyer was Alex Brito, who was the attorney that represented Donald Trump in the defamation case that he had against ABC News, which resulted in like a $15 million reward in Donald Trump's favor.
ABC's George Stephanopoulos repeatedly stated in this March interview with Congresswoman Nancy Mace that Donald Trump had been found liable for raping E. Jean Carroll, when he had instead been found liable for sexual abuse.
Trump and Cardone's defamation tactics amount to legal bullying. And even though the case was filed in Florida, which actually does have a reasonably robust anti-SLAPP statute, it is at least a little surprising to me that Ledger and Cardone settled out of court. Ledger even included an apology letter. But since they're both under NDAs under the terms of the agreement, neither Cardone nor Ledger have said anything publicly since signing the agreement. But that didn't stop Ryan Secco, the COO of Cardone Capital, calling the bullying tactics a landmark victory.
Grant has always been a big public figure, and that's why this case was so important to him, and that's why he felt like he got such a huge victory, because A, he won, B, it solves for the damage that has been put out into this new ecosystem of, YouTube and social media and Twitter and all this other stuff, because in any of this stuff that comes out where people are like, well, it's my opinion, that just doesn't work anymore.
I want to reiterate that since the settlement is completely sealed, Ledger might have paid absolutely nothing.
It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal, so you get nothing.
Cardone might have just backed off for a relatively toothless public apology. And this is interesting because in his public statement, Secco outlines a vision of free speech that, to me, seems specifically designed to defend scam artists and con men.
We moved into this world where everybody thinks they're getting confused with freedom of speech and then actually taking it to the next step. Because look, people should be able to say what they want, when they want, how they want. That's why we live in this society. But when you start taking it to the point where it's like, hey, I'm saying something about you, Matt, or Grant, or whoever it is, set this case aside, that's where it really starts to become very damaging.
This is pretty dystopian if you think about it. If someone makes a living as a con man, literally building up a trustworthy reputation in order to steal money from their clients, then disclosing the truth of who they really are is exactly what Secco and Cardone term damages. They want defamation laws to shield them while at the same time claiming free speech when they point their fingers at institutions and people who have more established reputations.
Schools are definitely a scam. IRAs and 401ks, what do y'all call them over there? The retirement plans?
Yeah, ISA.
Those are scams. Those are scams. Banks, complete scam.
Free speech for me, but not for thee.
I could pull a dozen or maybe even 100 examples of Cardone saying similar things, but let me just focus on a few for a second. At the beginning of 2025, Cardone traveled to Los Angeles while an out-of-control wildfire killed 29 people, burned down 1,000 buildings, and caused tens of thousands of people to evacuate. Cardone took the opportunity to distract from the rescue efforts and instead defame and slander the government response, calling the very people who saved his house from burning down in Malibu DEI hires.
And then that's my house. That house was 5 minutes and a bunch of concrete from going down. It's a terrible, horrendous, awful, unnecessary loss caused by a bunch of fucking incompetence. DEI is responsible for this, the environmentals. You got fucking chasing your environmental trying to save a fucking field mouse, some smelt. This is what you cause. You cause the worst environmental issues in California's history have been caused by you guys chasing a bunch of bull.
And it didn't stop there. He demanded a ban of both the FDA and the CDC and targeted both Anthony Fauci and Jerome Powell.
Hey there, Jeremy Powell. You are the new Anthony Fauci. Inflation is the new COVID, and you guys are going for the bull again.
These attacks on public figures to his audience of millions on social media don't seem any less defamatory than what John Ledger said about him in a tiny Clubhouse chat room.
If you are a con man of the highest order.
Should all of those people sue Cardone under the same terms that he has already argued in front of court are valid reasons? And in fact, perhaps that's what's so beautiful about Gary Brecka's lawsuit against Cardone, which uses this exact same logic. So let's get into Brecka.
Cardone Capital had been under investigation by a federal agency for the better part of 2 years, and that undercover federal agents were posing as employees.
Gary Brecka's origin story is inspiring if you don't listen too closely. After getting 2 bachelor's degrees in what he calls, quote, human biology.
I'm a human biologist. I'm not a physician.
He took a job that sounds like he was working as an actuary for a life insurance company.
I went to work in a niche market of life insurance. It's called the life settlement industry. And we would predict for the life insurance company how many more months you had left on Earth.
The way he tells it, he got so good at predicting human lifespans that he could make accurate guesses of when someone would die, sometimes within the range of just a few months. This was a boon for his boss's bottom line, and he says he excelled at making them money. Yet reaping a vast fortune wasn't enough for him.
I was very inauthentic about the way that I was living. I wasn't making an impact on humanity. I wasn't changing anybody's life.
Brecka was worried that he wasn't helping people. Eventually, he decided to leave the rat race and use his extensive knowledge to help ordinary people live longer.
I knew that I could take this information and somehow help people live healthier, happier, longer, more fulfilling lives.
And that's when he opened up a longevity business in a strip mall and developed a custom program for anyone who could afford his fees. And he was incredibly fortunate to attract a few celebrity clients, including Grant Cardone. And thus 10X Health was born. But before we get into that origin story, it's worth noting that Brecka's actual exit from the life insurance industry omits some key legal troubles he had during his tenure. According to court documents filed in the Southern District of New York, Brecka also lost a default judgment against Concord Capital Management for $929,740. According to the judgment, Brecka promised to build a, quote, premium loan finance facility called HSH, which he never bothered to build. The judgment leaves out exactly the details of what this company would do, but I'm going to guess, based on the timeline, that all of this had something to do with his work slinging for the life insurance industry. Brecka eventually declared bankruptcy, and it is reasonable to assume that this contributed to his exit from the insurance industry writ large, at least as much as his desire to help people. While Brecka claims that he was busy working on revolutionizing the health space, The truth is that over the next several years, Brecka was also accused of committing petty crimes. A police report from 2017 alleged that he shoplifted 2 pairs of Louis Vuitton glasses from a store in Florida worth $1,300. While another website I found listed more than 30 legal cases against Brecka. Just one note here, I wasn't able to access all of those cases, but I was able to read their descriptions on Reddit, who said they included like traffic violations, sort of minor violations, but a lot of them compounding over a very short time. Whatever the case, Brecka certainly has a long track record of low-level grifting, bad business dealings, and outright lying. And there's one place that anyone who has been following this channel knows where grifters can thrive. It's the field of untested and unproven longevity cures. In fact, a shady past and a talent for lying might actually be a prerequisite. Brecka founded the health company Streamline with his wife Sage Workinger, which focused on fat loss and lipo injections, male and female hormone optimization, and what they termed the, quote, anti-aging fountain of youth. This was perhaps an unintentionally appropriate sales pitch, considering Ponce de Leon looked for the eternal fountain of youth in the waters nearby the company's Naples, Florida office. At the time, Streamline was just one of dozens, or maybe even hundreds of companies that promised optimal health could be found by infinitely tweaking biomarkers, a claim that is still popular in functional medicine, but has serious limitations and lacks underlying data.
Some of the things that the wellness industry and functional medicine advocate probably work. They probably do work. But then it gets on to the question of why do we have to medicalize everything?
Where he lacked hard evidence, Brecka could instead rely on the endorsements of celebrities in search of miracle cures. An appearance on The Kardashians kick-started his rise into the limelight. In one episode, he nodded his head along enthusiastically with, now I think this is Kendall Jenner's, speculation that she might have had elevated cortisol levels after COVID.
I don't know what's wrong with me. And I talked to a doctor the other day and they said that post-COVID, sometimes you can have like heightened cortisol, I guess. And like that's probably, my cortisol levels probably haven't evened out yet. Yep.
Soon he was preaching longevity to the likes of David Beckham and P. Diddy. Brecka became a recognizable face in a community obsessed with questionable IV drips, red light therapy, ice bathing, breathwork saunas, continuous glucose monitoring, and endless optimization. The whole package became known as his superhuman protocol. Here's Dr. Mike's take.
He does share some info that is accurate. His website is well made. His product sounds super promising. A genetic test that discovers what's holding you back from feeling the way you want to? Only $600? And you'll get a customized supplement protocol that you'll have to pay more for. But wait, there's more. The Superhuman Protocol. Just buy the $133,000 Superhero Protocol bundle.
As an aside, these are all things that I've experimented with myself. I wrote a New York Times bestseller about cold exposure and Wim Hof method breathwork. I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro in my skivvies and later wrote a book exploring saunas, new breathing methods, and various kinds of elemental exposure.
Ice water is the best placebo.
So I am sympathetic to many of the broader ideas that also fascinate Brecka. But the key difference in our approaches is that, for me, I'm interested in the psychophysiological effects of how people respond to their own sensations in extreme environments. It's something that I've called the wedge. From my perspective, these alternative methods should be cheap or even free and akin to meditation. The practices are complementary to mainstream medicine and not cures in and of themselves. Brecka, on the other hand, sought opportunities to medicalize and then monetize every aspect of his protocols. And while he was careful to always remind people that he wasn't a doctor, the treatments he dished out were targeted at answering medical claims. Of course, Brecka's formula to commercialize every human sensation and then measure unintelligible biomarkers and genetic data was an attractive package for someone interested in making unrealistic amounts of money. Grant Cardone became a client, and here is Brecka describing what happened next.
He had a whole new zeal for life. And 12 months later, he acquired us and it became 10X Health.
Together, they rebranded the strip mall business into 10X Health, and according to the lawsuit filed by Cardone against Brecka, in 3 short years, Brecka went from unbankable to self-proclaimed celebrity biohacker. He and Workinger went from traveling commercial to flying on private jets, and from a strip mall to a near $20 million penthouse.
14 months, we went, revenue-wise, we went from $3.5 million to about $27 million.
This is, of course, an interesting way to rate your own contribution to public health. Sort of like an evangelical preacher boasting that the private jet that their congregation bought them was a relevant metric for the number of souls saved.
But it's not even the money. The money represents the total amount of lives that we're impacting because it represents how many people have taken a test, found a deficiency, are supplementing for that deficiency.
Cardone and Brecka copied the 10X business model Cardone had perfected in sales and real estate, and then everything, it just simply blew up. Under the 10X brand, Brecka connected with ever more high-profile celebrities, ultimately garnering a one-of-a-kind endorsement from the Ultimate Fighting Championship CEO, Dana White.
This is Gary Brecka. Many of you have heard me talking about him over the last several months and telling you how incredible this guy is, how he changed my life.
Over the course of 2 years, and with Brecka's advice on purchasing a multi-million-dollar gym, Dana White trimmed up and got ripped. Then he began promoting Brecka wherever he went. And indeed, White's transformation is notable, and it's admirable that he has such a positive outlook on things. It speaks to what a person can do with unlimited funds, training, and time. And as many commenters on the internet have also noted, his dramatic physical changes coincided with the public release of the weight loss drug Ozempic. And given Brecka's profile, he probably used testosterone supplementation along the way as well.
I don't think people were skeptical of whether or not Dana White's health improved. I think they were skeptical for the marketing and the promises that were made about why his health improved.
As Brian Johnson, also known as the Liver King, discovered very publicly around the same time, it makes a much better story when a body transformation uses only an extreme diet and exercise, without admitting to a startling amount of steroids.
I'm making this video to apologize because I fucked up, because I'm embarrassed and ashamed, because I lied. Yes, I've done steroids, and yes, I'm on steroids.
One reason that I seem skeptical, of course, is because quite a few 10X Health patients reported very different outcomes. Indeed, the Better Business Bureau gives 10X Health a truly remarkable F rating with 69 complaints, which is quite a feat. Most ordinary customers discovered that 10X was more like a pyramid or MLM scheme than an actual legitimate health system.
Gary Brecka and Grant Cardone of the 10X Your Health System are running a huge scam. These two people have this thing called 10X Your Health System. You can get a franchise.
And maybe this is the real key to 10X Health's profits. Just as 10X business ventures and marketing schools are really vehicles to get people to invest more cash into seminars with the promise that they might eventually make money,
pay to play.
10X Health is in part designed to convince customers to become franchise owners.
And now with some capital infusion from him, we're rolling out 1,000 locations across the United States. We just opened in London, Stadt, Switzerland. We're opening shortly in Dubai.
And this is a costly endeavor for franchisees and carries almost no risk for Cardone or Brecka. According to their website, starting a new franchise costs between $215,000 and $523,000. Of that money, 10X collects a $100,000 franchise fee. And it should go without saying that just like someone who contributes a single time to a political party campaign, once someone is in the 10X ecosystem, they are also targets for endless upsells to various Cardone and 10X Health seminar ventures, each of which comes with its own hefty price tag.
I probably spent about almost $250,000 for all his courses and everything, and it was a complete scam.
I'll never forget, these guys paid $12,000 each to sit in that chair.
Which has led to some sort of fun memes.
Hello? Who is this?
Grant Cardone.
Oh, fuck me. What do you want, dude?
Come on, man. Hey, let me tell you why I'm calling, all right? You got a second?
No.
Why didn't you buy our product?
Did you not hear me? I said I don't have a second. All right? And I didn't buy your product because I hate you. I'm broke as balls, and I'm going through some dark shit right now.
If this all sounds like a scammy MLM, you would almost be right. A typical MLM convinces self-employed marketers to buy expensive products which kick up a share of the revenue to the salespeople higher up in the MLM food chain. The majority of an MLM's money come from selling products to their sales force in a closed system. Meanwhile, 10x Health and the various Cardone ventures don't even seem to offer promises of a typical pyramid scheme with downstream revenue to the successful salespeople. Instead, they sell courses and franchises that merely offer a dream of a profitable business plan.
Everybody on this stream could be a billionaire.
Okay, first red flag.
Seats at Cardone's 2025 10x Growth Conference, for example, range in price from $997 to $30,000. While you're being dazzled by the onstage spectacle, the fine print on the various Cardone-owned websites is far less inspiring, saying, Cardone Enterprises does not guarantee that you will achieve any specific health, personal relationships, financial or other results, or earn any specific amount of income, or reach any particular goal. The disclaimers go on to say that the customer is solely responsible for their decision to follow Cardone's advice, that the company doesn't guarantee success in, quote, any way. And this one, it really got me, that nothing they are offering constitutes a, quote, business opportunity, which is to say, it's pretty much the same disclaimer that every wellness grifter puts on their website while selling unproven therapies, such as the one below 10x Health's website, which states that, quote, no material on this site is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I think we can agree that's a strange claim, since 10x is literally selling genetic blood tests that, quote, optimize your health and promise that, quote, your body does not have to get worse as you age. If that's not a medical claim, it's a miracle claim. Still, it's this very fine print that Gary Brecka should have probably paid more attention to before he signed any paperwork with Cardone in the first place. Because a few short years after 10x Health rocketed into the wellness bro stratosphere, everything fell apart in a rather dramatic fashion.
I was sold the same bill of goods you were sold, that Cardone Ventures was going to come in and scale my business. And what they did was they came and they put a contract in place that didn't require them to do anything, didn't require them to improve my business, scale my business, increase my profits, improve my margins. All the contract did was charge me monthly fees for something called the strategic business unit, which paid fees up to Cardone Ventures. Whenever I was talking, I would call and complain that this was not working. The answer was always, you got to take this next seminar. You got to do this other workshop, this boot camp, this retreat.
Brecka discovered what pretty much anyone looking at Grant Cardone's marketing materials should realize right away. The whole purpose of the various 10x brand businesses is to put money into Grant Cardone's pocket, not in the pockets of the people in his audience. Brecka also filed a separate lawsuit, this one for $100 million, against Grant Cardone's wife, Elena, for making a post on Instagram that Brecka believed connected him to the Sean Combs sex trafficking case.
She posted an old video of B. Diddy and I doing breath work, by the way, when he was a 10x Health client, and knowingly and with the intent to besmirch my reputation.
And isn't that just perfect? After Grant Cardone sued John Ledger for $100 million for, as he remembers it,
he called me a pedophile.
Gary Brecka then sues Elena Cardone for an incredibly similar perceived offense, and then spreads word about that slight all over the internet again. Meanwhile, in the dueling lawsuit that Grant Cardone filed, Cardone credits the 10x brand for all of Brecka's success, writing, quote, Cardone seeks an unspecified amount of damages along with injunctions and salary clawbacks because Cardone broke ties with 10x to start a separate brand called Ultimate Human, which provided nearly identical genetic testing, IV dripping, cold plunging, supplementing protocols designed to let people, quote, take control of their health, and give them the power to heal their bodies naturally with no invasive surgeries. Which is to say, it's the same basic slate of bro science biohacking available all across the internet from any wellness grifter with a six-pack and an Instagram account. And while I appreciate that Cardone might be upset by their very public breakup, this feels a little like Jimmy John's trying to enforce non-compete contracts for their sandwich artists who want to jump ship to Subway. Now, over the course of reporting the story, I reached out to both Cardone and Brecka on multiple occasions through official and unofficial channels, even sending Cardone this YouTube short in order to get his attention. Hey, Grant Cardone, I want to take you up on your offer.
Why wouldn't they interview me? It's not like I won't take the interview. I'll talk to anybody about anything.
So I've been working on a video for about a month about all of the various litigations that you've been involved with John Ledger, which you recently settled, and with Gary Brecka, and your relationships with Donald Trump, etc. And you have said in the past that you will take an interview with anyone, but when I reached out to your PR team, they said that you were just not available and that you didn't want to talk to me. Well, just maybe the message didn't get to you directly, so I am reaching out to you right here to see if you are willing to sit down and talk to me about what it is that you do.
YouTube is a clickbait phenomenon. The only way anybody can get subscribers there is to do a video with a big title. This is what I tell my people or our investors. Was I in the video? Did they interview me? Why wouldn't they interview me? It's not like I won't take the interview. I'll talk to anybody about anything.
Unfortunately, both their PR teams wrote back to me that neither Cardone nor Brecka were available for comment, which is too bad, because I have quite a bit that I would have liked to clarify with them and give them a chance to respond to. What I appreciate most about the cases here is that it doesn't seem like anyone is in the right. From my perspective, Cardone and Brecka are both extremely successful scammers who are suddenly upset that they both somehow fell for someone else's scam. Never mind that both of them make their living selling dreams of limitless wealth and health that are only as deep as the disclaimers on their websites. Which reminds me, do you remember the disclaimer at the beginning of this video where I said,
"By continuing to watch this video after this point, you agree to abide by the terms and conditions in the description below."
Did you by any chance pause the video and scroll down to those terms and conditions to see what they were all about? This is something that I would love to know from you down in the comments. Because in addition to absolving me and my company from any liability due to slander or defamation, anyone who read that disclaimer would have also noted this passage. Section 3, Membership Obligation. For viewers who continue viewing past the 5-minute mark, a legally binding obligation to purchase a 1-year premium membership to Scott Carney's Substack newsletter, Magnetic North, is hereby established. The discounted price for this membership is $80 payable to Pokey Bear LLC. This purchase is a material condition of continued viewing beyond the 5-minute mark. Failure to complete the purchase within 2 business days of viewing past the 5-minute mark will result in a late payment penalty of $100 million will result in a late payment penalty of $100 million due payable to Pokey Bear LLC. The viewer acknowledges and agrees that continued viewing past the 5-minute mark constitutes acceptance of this obligation and agreement to these terms. The $80 discounted price is a fixed and non-negotiable price for the first year of membership. Seriously, scroll down. It's all there in black and white. Now, you might think that this was pretty duplicitous of me, like I was taking advantage of your inherent laziness and that merely listening to my video should not require anything from you at all. But isn't this exactly the same argument that Cardone and Brecka are making when they promise their customers vast amounts of success, health, and wealth in every product and video they publish, and then rely on legal disclaimers to absolve themselves of any responsibility for the people who are dumb enough to actually follow their advice?
These guys pay $12,000 each to sit in that chair.
Anyway, you can sign up for my Substack newsletter at sgcarney.substack.com. And while you ponder exactly how seriously you need to take those terms and conditions that you've already tacitly agreed to, there's something much more pressing that we have to discuss. In my introduction, I said that this wasn't only a story about a lawsuit between a real estate scammer and a health grifter. For all their bluster and social media prominence, they are just a tiny aspect of something much more egregious. Because all of this video up until now was just a prelude to exposing what I believe is the largest pyramid scheme in history, the American griftocracy.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
Just over 50% of the American population voted Donald Trump back into office in 2024. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that result because it's frankly hard for me to understand. At the same time, I also want to acknowledge that you might have been one of those 75 million people who voted for him. In our current heated political reality, talking about politics is a third rail. Like every other human on the planet, I have my own sets of biases, and my biases tend to skew liberal. Still, we can all be better than our biases, and it's our collective job to agree on facts. And the most important fact that I want to get across is that the grifters and scammers that I have been documenting over the last 2 years on this channel almost all profit off of the Trump administration and the reformation of health and human services under RFK Jr. They have their pictures taken with RFK. They post on social media about the great things that are coming under the new leadership.
Welcome to MAHA, Make America Healthy Again.
And even spend huge amounts of time stumping for and appearing on stage with Donald Trump. Here is Grant Cardone on his 10X America tour.
Many of you in the room know him because he's probably the best marketer on planet Earth with the strongest brand in the world. Some of you will know this guy because he's a real estate mogul, but most of you motherfuckers will know him because he is the 45th president of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Let's evaluate that claim. Trump might well be the best marketer in the world, especially once you realize that marketing is really just another word for lying and faking it until you make it. Trump's marketing genius is really just that he will never back down from a lie once he has told it, and he has transformed that ability into real political power. Here's Ezra Klein.
Trump knows the power of marketing, the power of belief. If you make people believe something is true, you make it likelier that it becomes true. He clawed his way back to great wealth by playing a fearsome billionaire on TV. He remade himself as a winner after the 2020 election by refusing to admit he had ever lost. The American presidency is a limited office, but Trump has never wanted to be president. What he's always wanted to be is king. And his plan this time is to first play king on TV. If we believe he is already king, if we believe he already has all that power, we will be likelier to let him govern as a king. We will then give him that power.
The power of belief is effervescent until people act on it like it's real. The illusion only works when people start believing in it, which is also precisely how scams work.
For you guys to get scammed, you got to understand there's a scammer and a scammy. You are part of the scam, okay? For a con artist to actually affect a con, you have to be willing to buy into the con.
Scammers gain power because people place their trust, their money, and their political actions into believing the promises and threats are real. That tenuous connection between belief and action is why liars and scammers are so worried about their reputations and defend them at all costs. Because just like in the parable of the emperor who has no clothes, there is nothing more to the scam than its trappings.
What do you think about 10X America?
I like it. I like it. That hat looks very familiar to me.
It's a complete knockoff.
Interestingly, only a heavily edited version of this conversation between Cardone and Trump is available on YouTube. And other than the two of them agreeing on how great inflation is for the real estate market,
inflation is a good thing for real estate, not a bad thing for
Very
real estate,
good.
Okay?
I think that the part that is most telling here is that Grant Cardone is practicing what he preaches.
Collaborate with power, and then you want to write this down. Pay to play.
He collaborates with power so long as that power ultimately helps make him richer. As I record this video, Cardone is holding MAGA-themed 10X events across California in what looks like what might be laying the groundwork for a governor run in 2026.
I think if you would, first of all, you would automatically have my vote. I don't know if you're a Democrat or a Republican. I don't care. You have my complete and total endorsement. You know,
mark my words here. The primaries in that race are going to be amazing because Grant Cardone and Andrew Huberman, I believe, are both going to be running in the primary for Gavin Newsom's spot. Call me old-fashioned, but even though it's 2025, I still think that a person's character matters. And if a person has a history of bad customer relationships, petty theft, lying, and outright scams, or even fraud, that information is a predictor of how that person will act in the future. While Cardone calls Trump, quote, the best marketer on planet Earth, the reality of that statement is that Trump is one of the most talented and prolific liars in history. Even if you support Trump, you probably agree with that statement. The Toronto Star, the Washington Post, and CNN all keep separate trackers of his false or misleading claims and have documented more than 30,000 of them, averaging about 21 a day during his first term. Trump was also convicted on 34 counts of fraud in a New York court. For anyone who heard the Access Hollywood tape, they will be unsurprised that he was also found liable for sexual abuse.
Whoa. I did try and fuck her. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab him by the pussy.
And while the law specifically prohibits a president from profiting off of his position, Trump has repeatedly violated the emoluments clause in the Constitution and done exactly that. He has profited by booking government meetings at Trump hotels and resorts and releasing a meme coin that directly allows anyone to send him money without any transparency whatsoever.
To say it's a conflict of interest is like, insulting all the people who've had conflicts of interest before. It's so crazy to use the presidency in this manner to pump a meme coin to enrich yourself, insiders, and basically everyone but your standard base.
The scams are so in the open that we just let them pass by. And just like the people in his orbit, Trump uses defamation lawsuits to shut down the free press, getting a $15 million settlement from ABC and demanding $10 billion from CBS for the ridiculous charge of cutting an interview of Kamala Harris more favorably than he would have liked. And even suing an electoral pollster who predicted that Kamala Harris had a chance of winning in Iowa. The poll result was wrong, but being wrong isn't illegal. It's not defamation. These cases are all meant to stifle the free press, and basically every free press advocate in America agrees.
The Supreme Court has said, quote, the First Amendment has its fullest and most urgent application to speech uttered during a campaign for political office. And this is about as free speechy as it gets. This is a clownish lawsuit, perhaps the most ridiculous lawsuit that Trump has ever filed.
Press outlets cave and settle disappointingly because they fear that if Trump is willing to misuse the court system to his advantage, that the president will also use his power to attack them in some other way if the lawsuit fails. These are the tactics of bullies, and no surprise, also the same tactics of Cardone, Brecka, and the other people in the MAGA orbit. In an interview snippet that I teased earlier in this episode,
Cardone Capital had been under investigation by a federal agency for the better part of 2 years.
Gary Brecka said that Grant Cardone knew that he was being investigated by federal authorities. And yet under a Trump administration where the Consumer Protection Financial Board and the FBI and other oversight authorities have all been fired or gutted or at least are under attack, perhaps Cardone is feeling a lot safer than he was before because his relationship with Trump probably means that he's going to get more protection than the average person. And then there's RFK Jr. This is a man who until a few months ago believed strongly in protecting abortion rights, but then pledged in his confirmation hearing to do Trump's bidding, whatever it may be.
I'm pro-choice. I will implement President Trump's policies.
RFK personally profited off vaccine misinformation in the form of speaking and consulting fees. He also invested in an HPV vaccine that he would get rich off of if the government distributed it. Not only did he coin the term MAHA, for Make America Healthy Again, but he also trademarked it to sell anti-vaccine merch.
Now you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine, and yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines.
When he was forced to divest from the trademark, he gave it to Del Bigtree, the film producer behind the documentary Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe, a movie that when I tried to access it on YouTube gave me this community violation screen. Otherwise, I would play you pieces of the trailer. But the very worst part of RFK's grift is the privatization and deregulation of medical evidentiary standards, which appear designed to create a pseudoscience free-for-all all across the health space. He appears close with Kaylee Means, the founder of TrueMed, which frees up health savings account funds for the same suite of products that 10x Health promotes across its platform, from saunas and red light therapy gadgets to cold plunges and custom mattresses. While I agree that anyone should be free to try all of these things, and that I have seen personal benefit from some of them for myself, we should be wary about institutionalizing alternative health treatments as a replacement for mainstream Western biomedicine. While opening up these funds could theoretically help some people prevent illnesses before they develop in a sort of speculative and amorphous way, they also deplete funds from proven medical therapies in a way that personally and financially benefits the people in power. Now, I can hear the protests in the comments of this video in my head already. People will say that I have a case of Trump derangement syndrome and explain that in his first 4 years in office, there wasn't a complete catastrophe or systemic collapse. And I have to admit that the more respectful of those commenters have a bit of a point. Perhaps some of that big scam energy is actually a roadmap to personal wealth and success, which could indeed make some people in America great, or at least wealthy. So listen close to me on this point. While a person might accumulate wealth through grift, grifting doesn't create any value of its own. Grant Cardone takes money from businesses who could have instead used that cash to build and invest in themselves. Trump's scams funnel money into his own interests, not the interests of the American people. MAHA won't actually make the country healthier. The reason lifespans in America are as long as they are precisely because of the very public health infrastructure that is being dismantled right now. If it goes on long enough, eventually this music has to stop. But don't take it from me. Take it from Trump, when he was on stage with Cardone talking favorably about a thing that tipped the election in his favor: inflation.
Inflation has always been very good for real estate. But unfortunately, at the end, the whole thing pops. Okay, that's the bad part.
The president who won on an anti-inflation platform clearly admits that the inflation that hurts the country's bottom line only makes him richer, even though eventually it will all come crashing down.
Inflation is wonderful until it all explodes.
His goal, as far as I can tell, is to ride the grift long enough so that he can exit before the collapse. All right, you've been with me for a few hours now, and we've covered a lot of ground. Much of that ground is soaked in the trespasses on the spirit of truth and liberty. In the next video, I want to give you something of a silver lining, a little ray of hope that I believe could presage a slightly better age, or maybe a much worse age. I don't know. Introducing peak grift. This is a video about the macroeconomics of grifting, because it seems to me that we have arrived at the era of peak grift, where liars, cheaters, and charlatans will have an ever harder time selling their wares to unsuspecting audiences. And this is not good news. It should terrify absolutely everyone who is watching this video, because what happens after the collapse of the grifter economy is going to be so much worse than you could ever imagine. If you've been following this channel for a little while, then you know that I am something of a specialist in the rise of online wellness grifters who sell hope in exchange for telling you about their various discount codes. I've covered scam scientists and scam doctors and scam billionaires and scam influencers, and now we have a scam president. A few months ago, I reasoned that I could do a new video every week on a new scammer and literally be able to do that content for the rest of my life. But the relationship between grifters and their marks is changing right now in a fundamental way that has made me realize that the Griftoverse is barreling towards a collapse. To explain this, I want to start with a generally accepted definition of grifting, which is to make money through petty swindles and confidence tricks or other dishonest means, whereas a grifter is a person who engages in dishonest activity using charm or persuasion to manipulate others. In other words, at its very root, grifting is the monetization of lying. And we have seen a sharp rise of it in the last few decades, particularly among people who use social media to spread their scams. Now, on an individual level, we can point to lots of examples of how specific grifters have thrived. But what happens when we zoom out to the overall grifting economy, or if you will, the macroeconomic conditions that allow grifters to succeed? The one resource that all grifters share is a fundamental baseline of truth, or if you prefer, reality. Now, by definition, grifters monetize lies by subverting truth. Otherwise, it wouldn't be grifting. It would just be selling quality products that actually work. And herein lies a fundamental problem. For grifters to succeed, they need a stable base, which means a good economy, generally positive health outcomes, and enduring institutions, which ultimately earn the trust of the people in general. Grifters can only thrive by profiting off of the margins and the limits of that underlying foundation of trust. They capitalize on the cracks, not on the actual fully formed foundation. For instance, if Grant Cardone tells you that everyone can be a billionaire,
these guys pay $12,000 each to sit in that chair,
then you need an economy with a stable currency, a predictable rate of inflation, and markets where spending those dollars makes rational sense. And if Andrew Huberman tells you that the science of circadian rhythms means his blue blocking glasses will make you sleep better,
Roca and I designed these glasses,
then you need to realistically believe in the existence of credible sleep research that can actually help you optimize sleep. Or maybe you'll hear someone claim that you should ignore government public health advice around vaccines or Tylenol or whatever else, and instead trust their out-of-the-box thinking. This requires there to be a functional public health system that they can position themselves against. This kind of grifting is the main economic driver of most popular social media channels.
I want to tell you about All Family Pharmacy. Pick up what you need. Things like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, NAD+, methylene blue.
In the last 2 decades, it has become so rhetorically powerful that America elected a serial con man into office who immediately brought together a wrecking crew to fundamentally reshape the country in the image of a famous podcaster, grifter type person. I mean, many are literally podcasters, like Dan Bongino, the #2 spot at the FBI.
The FBI team did an amazing job.
And J.D. Vance is constantly on the podcast circuit.
We need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
Along with RFK Jr., who only became mainstream after multiple appearances on the Joe Rogan show.
When I had heard of you in the past, there was this narrative. And this narrative was you were anti-vax and you believed in pseudoscience and you were kind of loony.
And that's not even touching on all of the appointees who come directly from commentator jobs at Fox News. These are pundits, not technocrats. And that movement from technocrats to pundits has undermined the public health agencies and gutted scientific research grants, deprofessionalized the professional military, made a joke of the Federal Reserve's independence, undermined the integrity of the Supreme Court, and reduced the ability of statisticians to even study key metrics in the economy and society writ large so we know what is actually going on from a ground reality standpoint. In other words, the government has undermined the institutional stability and credibility that it took, 250 years to accrue. And this is leading to a weakening dollar, a weakening economy, fewer jobs, and a general mistrust of all government communication. And I'm even starting to think that any new science that comes out over the next few years during Trump's administration will be inherently suspect and biased, because the only science that is actually being funded somehow fits with the mission of a biased administration. For example, I'd like to point out Trump's recent announcement.
Today, we're delighted to be joined by America's top medical and public health professionals as we announce historic steps to confront the crisis of autism.
That taking Tylenol during pregnancy is the cause of autism, which is in part based on a study released by Harvard School of Public Health. Now, given that Trump has been waging a war to defund Harvard, it seems to me that the study was at least in part an attempt to curry favor with the administration. And even if I'm wrong on that, the mere appearance of corruption is all that it takes for anyone to be skeptical of the government's official communication on the matter. Now, add to this a proliferation of AI slop, state-sponsored propaganda from Russia, foreign actors, and even our own propaganda, and online scammers who have stolen more than $1 trillion in the last year. The net effect is that trust, the most important resource that grifters exploit to take your money, is being eroded at its foundations. Like any economic system, once you get an oversupply of one particular commodity, in this case grifting, it becomes increasingly difficult to make money in that niche. It's simple supply and demand. Now, in a stable society with reliable institutions, people look for ways to beat the system, where niche opportunities might let them get ahead. Sometimes they even succeed. But in a collapsing system, people need to seek out reliable information. And while I can't tell you where that reliable information actually is right now, I do know that the demand for it is higher now than it has ever been in my lifetime. Now, whenever I scroll through Threads or Blue Sky or my YouTube feed, the first question I ask is whether or not what I'm seeing is some sort of scam or propaganda. I think about the motives of everyone I come across and double check everything I can to see if it coheres with reality. It is a constant task, and I think that you're probably doing the same thing, which leads me to the real problem with peak grift. Actual grifters, well, they're in a pickle. With confidence in their products naturally degrading, there are fewer opportunities for them to exploit their audience with new lies. Meanwhile, new grifters who are trying to establish their brands are facing stronger headwinds than grifters of the past. This means that people who are most active in the Griftoverse need to turn towards more aggressive tactics in order to continue to find unconquered territory to exploit and profit off of. So, where is that territory? Maybe you've heard the phrase, liars, cheaters, and thieves. Now, that phrase in English implicitly states it as a progression towards criminality. Liars turn into cheaters who eventually become thieves, and that's what we're seeing now. Now, a 1946 Supreme Court decision called Ballard versus the United States, which I've done a video about, essentially made it legal to lie and to sell products to people on the basis of free speech and a religious exemption. But cheating and stealing are still and always have been generally illegal in America. But the Trump administration, well, what we're seeing is he's changing that. Trump's use of presidential pardons, let's just take that for example. It's shown that he has an intent on overturning judgments against convicted fraudsters in his orbit that he sees as allies. And this has included Ross Ulbricht, who's the founder of the dark web marketplace The Silk Road, in the first month of his term, the reality TV stars Rod and Julie Chrisley, who defrauded banks for more than $30 million, and Devin Archer, who defrauded the Oglala Sioux Nation of South Dakota for $60 million in fake bonds, and that the courts have now ruled that they can't even seek restitution for. Trump is doing everything he can to enable these sort of criminal and bad actors, especially when he sees like sort of mutual profit in it. He's also deregulated cryptocurrency and even issued his own meme coin, which now serves as a backdoor to directly solicit bribes from foreign governments. This isn't even that controversial. Everyone sees it for what it is. And it would have been a huge scandal in past administrations. But we are so destabilized as a nation right now that we sort of accept it as a status quo. And now that lying is the baseline, we may have also reached the apogee of grifting, a time when coming up with new scams is harder and harder, and that outright criminality is the only logical next step. And that is what the future holds for us. Peak grift means now the grifters, well, they're gonna be criminals. And that is all I have to say about that for today. Congratulations! You have made it to the last video in the series. This one is from way back at the origins of my channel in the early days when I was experimenting with a few different ways to send my work out into the world. It is a faceless YouTube video, and I didn't write a script for it. I had just a very specific outline that I was working from, and I had a good idea of what I wanted to say. And it is a big picture discussion, not about the economics of grifting and the systems that enable it, but where lying itself came from in our distant past. Introducing the evolution of lying. I spend a lot of time on my bicycle. Every year, it's something between 1,500, 2,000, and once even 3,000 miles cruising around the bike paths, mostly in Denver. And I sort of like meditate while I do it. I listen to a podcast. I, do a lot of my sort of abstract thinking while getting a little bit of exercise. And it's almost a spiritual place for me. And maybe because it's a spiritual place for me, there's a hazard that keeps on coming up, that crops up all of the time, that I have to put a little mental effort into avoiding. And it's that on these bike paths, when you do, great distances, there's these tiny little obstacles that you can hit. And for me, it's little critters, like, sometimes it's mice, or more often it's like crickets and grasshoppers, and these bugs that are right there on the path. And I just don't like killing bugs. I don't like the little crunch below my wheels and the knowledge that I took a life for no real reason, just incidents. So I try to swerve around them and feel just a little bit better about myself for not having killed something needlessly. And it's just sort of something that I habitually do. I mean, even after like a rainstorm covers Denver and I'm out for a walk and there's all these puddles on the sidewalk, if I see a worm struggling on the sidewalk, I will pick it up and move it to the grass in what, I hope is a way to save that worm's life. I'm a softie. It's just the way it is. And on these bike rides, I'll see all sorts of fauna and animals. There's bald eagles and there's hawks and deer and elk. And there's all sorts of things that are in the area around Denver. But on the bike path, the thing that I find most auspicious when I come across it, well, they're snakes. I think snakes are amazing. They move so hypnotically. And snakes' relationship to the bike path, as far as I can tell, is suicidal. Because snakes are much longer than, crickets or worms even. They can sometimes span the entire path. And I look at those snakes, they're coming in front of me and I'm moving between 10 and 20 miles an hour. And I think, oh my God, I could kill a snake. And so I get off my bike, every time, and I try to like shoo the snake off the path. I'll usually just walk up to them and they'll slither away into the grass, and I'll feel good because other bikers won't hit them. And then I get back and I resume my journey and put on my podcast and keep going. But I like seeing snakes. I find them interesting. And there was this one time I saw a snake on a bike path, and usually they're garter snakes. These, maybe they're 1.5 feet, 2 feet long, but there's also locally, we have other species here too. There's bull snakes and rattlesnakes. And bull snakes, they're about the diameter of like a banana or a cucumber, and they're 3 to 4 feet long. And they're just really, really cool looking. And I always stop and I always look at the bull snakes. And there's this one time I was on a busy part of the path. I just finished, I think, about 17 miles. I had about 8 miles to go on my ride. And I get to this section, and there's this bull snake sunning itself on this warm path, and it's loving life. And I know that if I pass it and just go on my way, that bull snake is going to be crushed by another biker. It is just going to happen. So I get off my bike and I walk over to the bull snake, which is just sunning itself. It's loving life. And I start to try to shoo it away. I first try to get close to it, and it's not really moving. So I grab a stick and I push this bull snake. And at first it doesn't react. And I'm like, are you okay, snake? And then it sort of like springs to life. It like notices that I'm moving it, and it coils into a circle in that sort of strike posture. Its head comes up. Its head maybe like 9 inches, a foot off the ground. And it's almost like its head, it flares. That skin behind its neck, it flares, and its tail comes up a few inches off the ground. And there's this sound that's coming out of its mouth, like it's like a rattling. It's like I can't do it. I can't do the justice to it with my mouth. But this snake is rattling. It's in strike position, and I take a step back, and I'm like, whoa, wait. I thought this was a bull snake. Bull snakes are not poisonous. But the rattlesnakes in the area, this snake looks a hell of a lot like a rattlesnake, and its tail is even moving. And I'm like, oh my God, I almost touched a rattlesnake. And I step back and I look at it for a while, and my brain is going back and forth. Rattlesnake, death. Bull snake, fine. And I still want to save the animal either way. And I realize that snake, it's lying. It's definitely not a rattlesnake. It just is doing a hell of a good impression of a rattlesnake. And eventually I shoo it off, and I think to myself, wow, that was impressive, snake. Like, you really made me doubt myself. And you defended yourself by lying, by pretending to be something that I know is dangerous. And this is an adaptation, or maybe just a behavior that you've learned or instinctually just know for self-preservation. And I realized that lying, well, that's evolutionarily advantageous for survival. In fact, lying might even be necessary. Lying is an incredible strategy that animals and humans have developed and really worked hard on. And I find this, as a journalist, as somebody whose main gist in life is about telling the truth, well, it's quite a thing to reckon with, because lying is so darned effective. In fact, truth is not effective. If the snake couldn't coil up, it couldn't scare off its adversaries. And we see so many examples in the natural world of animals that can impersonate other animals to their advantage. How many moths have eyes on the back of their wings to make a predator think that, oh, it's actually looking in the face of another predator? And that subterfuge saves that animal's life. In fact, you could even say that truth is actually evolutionarily disadvantageous in so many cases. And I'm going to give you the example of the rattlesnake. It's known that right now, the rattlesnakes in urban areas around the world, mostly in America, that's where we have the most rattlesnakes, but rattlesnakes are actually rattling less than they used to. I mean, there still are rattlesnakes that rattle, but the incidences of rattlesnakes actually rattling is decreasing because the rattlesnakes who rattle often get killed. They display to a human that they're dangerous, and the human will go and kill the rattlesnake, which is such an interesting problem to have. The rattlesnake was initially a warning to say, hey, I don't actually want to fight you. I don't actually want to use my venom to kill you. And I'm just warning you that there's a problem. And other animals realized that that was an effective strategy, so they imitated the rattlesnakes. But now the rattlesnakes are being killed because they're telling the truth about who they are. It's a hell of a thing. This podcast today is about lying. It's about truth and how we want the world to be and how the world actually is. And this is a depressing subject for me. I'm a journalist. I'm someone who has essentially taken an oath. I have a duty to my listeners and my readers to do my utmost best to convey reality as I understand it in an honest way to you, my listener. And if I don't do that, you have every right to be incredibly angry at me and to no longer be my listener and call me names, to leave angry comments in the description down below saying that Scott is a bad journalist. And I get actually a fair amount of those comments. And I think the reason why I get a lot of those comments is because I actually tell the truth so often, when in reality a lot of us want lies. And that lying is actually, it's a great strategy for success. Let me give you another example from another totally different context. On June 6th, 1944, the Allied forces in England were going to land in France on a beach called Normandy in an event called D-Day. And in the run-up to this, there was a massive disinformation campaign to basically confuse the Nazis, who knew that something was coming, but they didn't know where the landing exactly was going to be, and they had to put their forces on the right part of the beach. And if they did it successfully, they would massacre tens of thousands of soldiers who would be involved in the liberation of Europe and the defeating of the Nazis. And we all know that killing Nazis is a great thing to do in World War II. There's no problem with that. But to do that, the Allies had to lie. They had this disinformation campaign. They took a dead soldier and they dressed him as an officer and put coded instructions with misinformation of where the Allied landing would actually be. And it washed up on the shore and the Nazis found it. And they believed that the Americans and the British troops were going to land on a different area of France. And the Nazis built up their defenses in the wrong place. And a lot fewer soldiers died because of it. Espionage is an act of war, and it is incredibly effective. And if you don't lie really well in the military, you're going to lose a lot more soldiers. We see this in Ukraine right now. There's disinformation campaigns in the propaganda world, but it's also in the way we hide artillery pieces on the battlefield. We have like inflatable artillery pieces so that when the Russians do drone strikes on artillery, sometimes they hit balloons instead of hitting actually useful weapons of war. Deception and subterfuge are effective and necessary, because the army which actively telegraphs its punches is the army that loses. And the architects of these big lies, well, we call them heroes. We valorize the ability of Cold War spies to steal secrets and do dirty tricks because it gave us victory in battle. But on an individual level, a lot of people lie to give themselves unfair advantages on the people around them. And, well, it's disheartening. I mean, you probably know liars, right? You've probably caught someone out in a lie. And when you've seen them do it and you have the evidence to show that this person is just full of it, well, you sort of hate them. You judge them. And you don't really want to be around them anymore. Because that liar, they undermine trust. There was this person that I knew, this was probably 10, 15 years ago, who would come over to my house, and I hung out with her all the time. We'll call her Beth. Her name's not Beth. And she told me that as a kid, as a younger person, she would steal things from people's houses, like small things, like things that weren't necessarily important, like one sock from a drawer. And she would get sort of like a thrill out of it. And doing this sort of like small little crime was, a private thing that she had for herself. And she would never do it anymore. But when she told me this, well, I didn't want to hang out with her anymore. I felt like I just couldn't trust her because she was a liar. Because when you enter into someone's house, there's this implicit understanding that you will be trustworthy with the stuff that they own and not play games. And I lost a ton of respect for her. But the funny thing is that she was telling the truth, right? She was telling me something in confidence about her personality where if she had just lied, well, I wouldn't have lost the respect for her. And I feel like that's actually a violation of another fundamental value that I have, is that we should all be truthful about the things around us. How do we sort out this complexity, these contradictions? How do we be humans and good people in a world where it's so obvious that lying is, well, oftentimes the best strategy? How can I be a journalist in a world knowing that the keys to success are so frequently misinformation instead of information? How can I be a journalist where people look at journalists and they assume that we're liars? They assume that we're no better than politicians trying to get ahead in the world by making up stories that just make us look better or get more views or more clicks. Because the truth is, the sad truth is that lying works. Lying keeps that bull snake alive, and it gives you the advantage in accomplishing your goals. And I personally hate this truth. And one of the things that I love most about journalism is when I get to expose a liar. I go in and I meet somebody, and usually when I'm interviewing somebody, I presume that they're telling me the truth. But when I find out that they've lied, oh my God, it's like I feel personally betrayed, and I take a great joy and get satisfaction out of laying out evidence that they have lied. It's part of my nature, and I can't even tell you if it's necessarily a good part of my nature, because sometimes people want the lie. They want to believe a lie, both the person who's telling it, because it has become a part of their fundamental story, and there's also an audience that person often has, and they want to believe the lie too. Because sometimes lying makes us feel better about the reality of the world. As a journalist, I want to explore the reality of the world and expose it. And oftentimes that puts me in conflict with people that I don't want to be in conflict with, that I would rather actually see the good in. But I do this because I want to believe that a society built on truth is somehow fundamentally morally superior to a lie that's built on mythology. And I think maybe this bent in my personality goes back to like Enlightenment era thinking, 1700s, when we're discovering science and objective reality. And we have this idea that there's like laws in the universe to some degree, and we can come at a concept of truth which is outside of the individual. Well, in science, you're looking for truth, and it doesn't matter if the truth is something you don't want to believe. The truth is out there. And I see myself as maybe part of that project to some degree. And I also wonder that what happened before the Enlightenment, like in the medieval era, before, when everything was sort of subjective. We had whole science at that point was called alchemy, and it was magic. It was about your subjective experience in the world. And at that time, did they hate liars too? Did they see lying as just sort of the way things go? I think a lot about the belief in God when I go back to that, because there's a lot of examples of people making oaths to a deity, putting their hands on a Bible or swearing to something which is greater than them, that maybe is going to catch up to them in the afterlife and punish them if they're not being truthful. And I think that belief in a supernatural world was the way that people could learn to trust each other. Because lying is often about the individual, and truth is about society. I might gain an advantage over you right now that might make me more money or make me more impressive or something. But if everything I do is built on lies, how do I escape that? Eventually, reality will catch up to you. As a journalist, I guess maybe I feel like I am reality catching up with liars. It doesn't always make me popular. One of the interesting characteristics about lying is that once you start lying, well, it creates patterns that you can't really get out of very easily. It's the danger of it. Because if someone finds out that that bull snake is just a liar, well, people are going to go eat that bull snake. And they're not going to trust anything that that bull snake does, even if the bull snake has some maybe defenses that it has available to it. When I found out that my friend was a potential kleptomaniac on a very small scale, I didn't trust anything that she ever did other than that. That became her whole identity. So once you start lying, you have this pressure to keep up the lie. There's another Nazi saying, which was, if you tell a lie, tell a great big lie. Because it's not worth it to get stuck in the small lies. You want to pepper in truth. And when you lie, you want it to be the sort of lie that that changes the society around you, and you actually get an advantage out of it. Because otherwise, all you're doing is lying for meaningless purposes. You want that lie to actually give you power. Of course, Göring was a horrible, horrible person who helped design the Holocaust. So take that piece of advice for what you will. And it's interesting to me that when the liar ultimately fails and is either disclosed as a liar by, say, a journalist or someone who you find out there's too many contradictions in what they say, that once they have been exposed as a liar, the liar has two more options, right? One is to come clean and to admit the truth. This almost inevitably fails. Or it's just to keep on doubling down and lying and lying and lying, because you can't escape that cycle. I think this is how pathological liars are born. is that it starts with a little lie or maybe even a big lie, and they can't get out of it, so they get into this pattern where they find it's actually easier to lie. It's easier to come up with untruth than it is to bother with truth, which is actually very hard to keep up with. And you don't get rewarded for truth. Think about the scientific literature. There are so many clinical trials out there and experiments. And the way it works is you come up with a hypothesis, and then you test that hypothesis against objective measures. And if you get a good result, you get a publication in a paper, and maybe that helps you get your tenure, or there's some sort of product which comes out of it. You certainly get accolades by people for being the discoverer of something new. But there's almost no prize at all for a null result, where your hypothesis didn't work out. And there are so many meta-analyses that's come out after the fact that have shown that lying is a huge problem in the scientific literature, because people invest a lot of time trying to uncover new hypotheses and testing them. And there's just so much pressure to create scientific results that aren't actually real. Because if you publish that result and people aren't able to check it in a systematic way, well, you're going to get that promotion. You're going to get that drug approved. You're going to get some sort of prize. There are almost no journals dedicated to null results, right? There's almost no journals of people saying, hey, I want to see if this drug actually makes someone's kidney failure go away, and it didn't work out, so they publish it. No, those results don't ever actually get put out there, because journals are based on the positive. They want to tell a positive story. That's what drives the headlines. The null results don't get interest, which means that truth doesn't drive interest, and this is a known problem in the scientific literature. Of course, once you fake your data once and you build your career on that fake result, you have to keep on going. You have to keep on building on that fakeness. And those foundations, well, they crumble eventually. But hopefully you bet that they crumble after your career has already pushed you into retirement and you have your beach house in Malibu or that nice vacation home on the lake. You already hope that you've escaped because that's your win condition. And maybe people never find out about it. I did a little digging into the available research on lying, and there's this really cool behavioral psychologist at Duke University called Dan Ariely. And he's an interesting guy. If you go to his Instagram profile, he looks incredibly unique. As a kid, he was burned on the face, and it made it. He's not really disfigured, but it made it impossible for him to grow a beard. So when you see him on his Instagram profile, he has half a beard, and he says that the reason why he keeps his beard like that is because, well, he knows it looks weird, but it's also an honest expression of who he actually is, because he really believes in this. Well, he believes in truth. And even if it looks weird, he wants to tell the truth about who he is. And I find that very, very inspiring. And there was this article about, he'd come out with a new book on lying back in 2018. And there was this great review of it in the Washington Post. And rather than read passages from the book, I'm gonna look a little bit at that article, just to give you a little bit of his wisdom. Here's the problem with lying. This is from the article. Research shows that the more you lie, the easier it gets, and the more likely you are to do it again. And then quoting Dan Ariely, the dangerous thing about lying is people don't understand how the act changes us. We, as a society, need to understand that when we don't punish lying, we increase the probability it will happen again, Ariely said. In a 2016 study in the journal Nature Neuroscience, Ariely and his colleagues showed how dishonesty alters people's brains, making it easier to tell lies in the future. When the people uttered a falsehood, the scientists noticed a burst of activity in their amygdala. The amygdala is a crucial part of the brain that produces fear, anxiety, and emotional responses, including that sinking, guilty feeling you get when you lie. But when scientists had their subjects play a game in which they won money by deceiving their partner, they noticed the negative signals from the amygdala began to decrease. Not only that, but when people faced no consequences for dishonesty, their falsehoods tended to get even more sensational. And this is that slippery slope problem. When you lie and you get away with it, you probably get these dopamine chains that reinforce the fact, hey, that you got away with it, and you got away with it, and you got a reward. And your brain's circuitry, well, it changes, and it makes the lying more advantageous than the truth. Okay, before I go on any further, we're going to go to that point in the podcast where I tell you that, hey, there's no ads here. And I'm doing this because I love this project. And I think that if you've made it all the way to a half an hour into this project with me, you probably get something out of this. For those of you who love supporting podcasts and being part of this sort of investigative unit, sending me the great tips that you give me and these like subjects for new shows, I want to tell you that I have this way that you can support the show and actually be part of the creative process by joining up at my Patreon. And it's not very expensive. It's more expensive than nothing, though. I think it's like $10 a month. And you get podcasts and shows a little bit early. And you also get a direct line to me. And I'd love you to consider signing up for it. There's a link down below in the show notes. It means so much to me because honestly, when you look at podcast metrics and what ads are worth, you're worth about half a cent. That's how ads value you. And I think that the whole idea of trying to monetize a podcast where humans are worth 1 cent is ridiculous. It doesn't work. It doesn't support actual useful and good content. So I don't do ads, and instead I hope that some of you would consider supporting the show that way. But if not, I get it. There's shows that I don't support, that I listen to, and I get it, and that's no problem. This is a free thing. You listen to this on Spotify, and it's free. On YouTube, I do run ads because, hey, that's just the way it goes. But here, I don't. And instead, I ask you to do this other favor for me, if you would. Download the show on Apple and leave me a 5-star rating. Or if you're listening on Spotify, just leave me a 5-star rating. But if you do, I will read your comments. And you can make the comments funny. I actually would prefer them to be funny. Tell me about how you love Rubik's Cubes. And I will read that if there's a 5-star, because that helps the ratings. And it gives me feedback from people who, they like being here. I'm going to read one of these reviews. Actually, a couple of reviews came in. I'll save some for future shows as well, because I don't want to just bore you talking about myself. But I'll read this one review. It came from Frida35 on Apple just a few days ago. Thought-provoking. The one-person podcast format is all too often overly stilted and scripted. Scott is able to breathe life into it like a professor of the college class that you actually enjoyed attending. He effortlessly weaves in personal anecdotes into larger stories, and the result is seamless. Interview formats or two-person pods only seem to exist to make up for a single host's lack of charisma or things to say. Scott doesn't need anyone else. He's a spectacular storyteller. This is a 5-star podcast. I love that. I love that so much because I love this monologue format. It just lets me go in depth on a topic that honestly usually is keeping me up at night, and I'm grinding on this concept of lying perhaps. And maybe at 3 a.m. last night, I was grinding on the question of lying and how to address it. And now I get the opportunity to talk to you about it and tell you what my dream time thoughts really are. But I also do some interview formats too. I've been doing a lot more of those recently because there's actually some people that I really enjoy talking to. So free to 35, I love that you love these monologues. And, honestly, if anyone's listening to this and they also like monologues, I sometimes run polls down below and I ask people, do you want my interview shows or do you want my monologue shows? And this is actually super valuable to me to know because I can do both, but both take time and resources away from the other things that I do. And so there's going to be a poll down there on Spotify right now where I'm going to ask you, do you like monologues or do you like interviews? And just tap an answer for me and let me know which one you like, and I'll do more of those. Or maybe you like both, in which case, God bless you. Let's listen to both. Okay, so there I've said it. Just join Spotify if you can. Leave some reviews. It helps me continue this. And let's go back into lying, because there's something that I have to tell you about Dan Ariely that's really, really interesting. So Dan Ariely wrote the book, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. And he had those great lines, those great insights about how the brain gets rewired when you lie. But here's the thing. His study may have included incredibly fake data. One of the things that he wrote about, just to summarize it, was that he used this data from rental car returns. You sign those contracts about, did you hit anything? Are there any problems with the car, etc. And the data that he wrote about in his book was that if you put the honesty pledge at the beginning of the contract, people would be more honest when writing that contract, instead of putting that honesty pledge at the end, where you put your signature. And, he found all this data it was from rental car company contracts that had sort of A and B groups. And this data, he said, look, if you put the pledge in the front, people will actually be more honest. And this research was grounding in his books. It was mentioned in TED Talks. And even the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service in the United States, claimed it worked for them on various governmental forms when they're trying to have people accurately put their tax data there. They thought it would raise the incidence of people actually being honest on those forms. But it turned out that study had mostly fabricated data in it. And I'm not going to go into all of the ways that it was uncovered, but I will say that Casey Feisler, who's a great researcher, data researcher here in Denver, Colorado, has a number of wonderful Facebook and Instagram posts, TikTok posts about how his data was shown to be fraudulent. He had worked with other professors and they'd compiled data into these spreadsheets. But the funny thing was that when you actually looked at the data and you did the statistical analysis on it, it was impossible to be real data. It was just, and all of the fake data was put in a different font. And it turns out that there is no evidence, no real evidence that putting an honesty pledge at the beginning of a form is going to make someone actually more honest. And Ariely has gotten a ton of, academic appointments, a big social media following, quite a bit of money and prestige for his work on lying and cheating, which was based on fraudulent data. Now, he has, of course, come out and said repeatedly in the press, I'm going to quote you from, this is like a Daily Mail response. He says, I can see why it's tempting to think that I had something to do with creating the data in a fraudulent way. I can see why it would be tempting to jump to that conclusion, but I didn't. If I knew that data was fraudulent, I would never have posted it. That's what he says. But it's also clear that, he was where the buck stopped. He was the top guy, and he faked the data. The expert on lying maybe learned that lying was an incredibly effective strategy. And the allegation is that maybe he pursued it. And he's been under scrutiny on several other times. And in 2010, he may have told NPR that insurance agencies show that dentists often disagree whether x-rays show cavities or not. But they go about doing those dental surgeries anyway because it gives them more money. Well, there was no evidence that was accurate either. It just feels accurate, right? It feels like it should match reality. And there's this pleasure that we get, right? As journalists, as people in the press, as truth seekers, to just grind Rayleigh into the dust for what may have been a lie, even though at the same time we liked the lie in the first place. It felt right. It answered some sort of, hey, that intuitively that felt right. You would make an honesty pledge at first, and then you'd be more honest. There's something about that seemed right, and we made him a hero. And how often does that happen on social media anyway? Like, how often, I work on the fringes of science a lot, and I know what I say when it goes beyond the science. But it's so unbelievably clear that if we want to get famous, if we want to have a social media following on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, you want to make more and more exaggerated claims about what works. Like if you're giving advice about business, you want to give more and more outrageous advice for how many outrageous profits you can get by investing in crypto, or how much weight you can lose by taking this pill or jumping into this ice bath or taking this Pilates class. You want to make claims that stand out. And the truth is that, well, not everything stands out. Not everything that is true is actually groundbreaking. The best way to lose weight is probably just to reduce your caloric intake and get some regular exercise. That advice is sound, but we want that supercharged feat. And when you offer that supercharged feat, people will come to you. They will flock to you, especially if you can create notice, if you can be flashy, if you're exceptionally attractive, or you do those stunts that look cool in a 2-second clip on the introduction of a TikTok video. These outrageous claims are what we want. And I say we want it because it's clear through the data because that's what we watch. Even if we don't want to be the sort of people who watch lies, our actual actions, the truth of the matter is that we want that. That who we are is how we act. It's a real conundrum. Because then when we out those people as, blatant liars and we throw them under the bus, and we want to think that everything that they had ever done was a lie. We destroy their whole character. We want to jump on that cancel culture bandwagon because we feel morally justified for doing so. And I cannot entirely disagree with that feeling. And it's something I struggle with all the time. Most recently, people who've been following me, I've been noting that there's a lot of lies around the Wim Hof method, particularly with Wim Hof's own stories and how he presents himself as having 26 world records. Well, there's no record of those world records. I can only verify 2 or 3 ever having occurred. And the other ones it's just a number. I have 26 world records, and there's no way to fact check that. And it annoys me. It annoys me that when I look at, say, Wim Hof's Wikipedia, I see that it's constantly lilting towards the PR side of things, where things that are factually backed up with sources are just becoming conjecture. And it's because there's bad actors. And I think I know exactly who that bad actor is by looking at IP addresses and looking at other information. And I can be like, I know this individual, I know your actual name, and I can see what you're doing. And yet, it's an effective strategy to promote something. I see comments on my YouTube videos where people's names, they'll post a nasty comment and it'll be one name, and then 10 minutes later, it will be the same comment from a different name. And I know that there's a sort of a strategy to undermine my work and undermine the veracity of what I do. And it is, well, it's effective. And it's sad that it's effective. Because what I'm doing is I'm going out and trying to tell the truth about something with documentation, with grounded evidence. But it's clear that not everyone wants the truth. Not everyone even values the truth. In fact, people might find the truth impolite. How often do we lie because we want to save face for somebody? You know, maybe your mother baked you a pie and it wasn't a good pie, right? It was a bad pie. It was too salty and you couldn't really chew it. But when she asked you how it was, you definitely told her it was a great pie, because it's impolite to not tell someone that they who put effort into something and created something out of love. Well, it's impolite to tell them that they didn't make a great pie. And so we make this white lie, and then that person thinks that they're a better cook than they are, and maybe that is okay because we want to preserve the relationship. But how does a journalist exist in that world where there is a mythology and factual inaccuracies that are obvious, that are trackable, that are documented, that can just be outright shown? How can a journalist exist in a world where we actually prefer lies to truth? Maybe all we ever wanted was the lie. Maybe we saw something that was sort of crazy and outside of the bounds, and looking at a lie was actually beneficial to our mental health. This is the guts of the placebo effect, right? It's just simply the idea that something which gives you hope can help you change physiological processes in your body. Not unlike how lying changes the amygdala circuits in your body to become more of a liar. Well, there's the positive spin that sometimes the lie actually makes you a healthier person. Wrap your mind around that. Sometimes having a myth of an indomitable individual who can break all the limits of the world and gets over their own grief and mental struggles through constant fighting against the elements. Sometimes that gives people inspiration to do the same thing. And that idea of constantly facing adversity makes someone a better person. How do we deal with that contradiction? I struggle with it. I struggle with it every single day. It keeps me up at night. And I did this other podcast not so long ago. It was podcast 23, I Am Become Death, Oppenheimer and the Kali Yuga, which is about the problem that Oppenheimer had to face, right? He was facing the fact that he was going to create a nuclear weapon that would be the dawn of the nuclear age. And it's a great conversation with my friend Sid Rao, and it's the question about duty. What does somebody do? What is someone's duty in a world where there's no obvious answers? And while Oppenheimer was talking about the duty to be a scientist and let his science proceed, I deal with this question of duty all the time as a reporter. What is my duty in any moment? Is it my duty to spread a lie or to uncover the truth no matter where it leads? And it's clear that in some cases I have the problem of the rattlesnake, right? The rattlesnake that I began this whole conversation with is that the rattlesnake who tells the truth of who it is sometimes gets killed, because people don't like rattlesnakes that have poison. In fact, we would rather all be the bull snake, the person who pretends to be someone with the venom, who has the actual goods, but isn't, that there's no actual grounding reality underneath it. I don't think this is going to be an issue that I'm going to resolve today on this podcast. I don't think that this is going to be a thing that I will ever not struggle with, because it's a fundamental tension in the duty that I have and the just general lilt that I have as somebody who is, I guess, a truth teller, who presents myself as somebody who tells the truth. And there's also some contradictions in this. I know that I'm a deeply fallible human, just like every other deeply fallible human. And when I talk extemporaneously like this, I'll bet you, actually, I know this is true. Sometimes I'm given towards hyperbole. Like if I don't have an article right in front of me, sometimes I will opt, unconsciously for a more impressive figure. If I say that, 40% of people in a clinical trial improved, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, well, if I actually go to the paper later, it might have actually only been 26%. And sometimes there's this natural lilt to impress people because bigger numbers sound better than littler numbers. And I think that is something that I struggle with when I do extemporaneous things, like, in this podcast. Although I don't know if I spoke about too many studies that I didn't have in front of me right now. It's certainly a tendency for humans to want to impress other humans. I think that's a minor sin. And I'm sure if you go back through my podcast, you'll see moments where I've probably done that. On the other hand, I think subterfuge and intentionally reversing the truth and making claims that are like contradictory, they're just straight up false, I find that mean. I find that sort of bullying. And I don't think society at a very large level can function if we actually had everyone sabotaging the truth for their own personal gain again and again. Because what sort of society does that become? It becomes a society where the individual is the only thing that is important and not the general principle that we're trying to achieve some sort of real truth with our existence here on Earth. I don't really quite know how I can end this particular podcast. Like, I don't know how this all comes together, except we all have a duty to be the best people we can be. And it's very clear that lying is effective. I can't resolve this problem in my brain. I can't come to a solution because I think ultimately however we act on this information is ultimately going to be left up to us. But I think that there are going to be people in the world who are liars, and there's going to be people in the world who are truth tellers. And the sad truth is, I think that the truth tellers are at a disadvantage. I think that the truth tellers who don't get to continually and pathologically make up things because they have to go check their facts and they have to at least try, I think they're at a disadvantage from people who can say whatever the hell they want. And I don't think it's a war that we're going to win. And that's a little depressing. But maybe it's just something that we have to do. It's something that a war that we need to wage and continually do our duty in this environment and realize that all of us are fallible and none of us are going to get it right. Maybe, though, you can be a rattlesnake if you're a rattlesnake, and you can be a bull snake if you're a bull snake. And as I go riding on my 3,000 miles a year, which actually has happened, I have done 3,000 miles in a year. But as I go out there and I do this, we should all try to do as little harm as we can to those little critters that we might run over. And that we should try to strive to preserve the truth and preserve life. Because what else are we doing on this earth? From Scott Carney Investigates in Denver, Colorado, this is me talking to you from Pokey Bear LLC. Thank you so much for being here with me. Whoa. All right. Thank you so much for tuning into this entire video series. I'm impressed with your stamina and your investigative spirit, and just sticking through this whole compilation. If you liked this sort of thing, I'll be doing more of them. I actually have one about AI that I'm putting together, and another about stem cells, and they'll drop in the next few months. Also, if you are like, if you've been here, you might be a super fan. You might be a super fan because we're like 3 hours in. And if you are, I want to offer you, I want to suggest to you that maybe you want to go check out my Discord server. There's a link to it down below, which is sort of like a web board meets like a video channel meets something that's not owned by Google and YouTube. And it's a place where you can, I hang out there a lot. So it's a place you can text me and talk about stuff. Come in there and tell me that you watched this whole thing. And I might upgrade you into that premium space. Send me a direct message, and I can up your profile into our super secret place where you can see upcoming investigations and stuff like that. Until next time, from Foxtopus Inc. in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates. Thank you so much to my supporters here on Patreon and on Substack and even on YouTube who make this work possible. It means the world to me that you're here. And if you want to get your name on the honor roll, all you need to do is sign up at the links down below. From Foxtopus Inc. in Denver, Colorado, this was Scott Carney Investigates.